Chapter 772. Lebaston. Lebaston Lestrange's brother, Rodolphius Lestrange, noticed that something was wrong with him. From his angle, he could see the side of Lebaston's face sticking out of the bars. His face was deathly pale, and his eyes had completely lost focus, as if there was an indescribable fear dominating his mind. Rodolphius Lestrange shouted loudly, "Lebaston!" However, he realized that his brother did not respond to the sounds from the outside world. The liveliness of a human seemed to be leaving this body, taking away the last bit of warmth from this cold and dead Death Eater, leaving behind a cold and stiff body that looked like a corpse. His unfocused eyes stared straight at the passage leading to this floor of the prison. Because of the different angles of the cells, Rodolphius and Bellatrix could not see where he was looking at. Lebaston's lips had turned white, and his eyes were blue and black. As he breathed, frost gradually covered his upper lip, mouth, and nose. Thick white mist spurted out of his mouth and condensed into ice on the iron bars. He was twitching and trembling. Rodolphius stared at him nervously, for fear that his soul would leave this body in the next second. At this time, Bellatrix could already see Morgatha's shadow from the corner of her eyes. She noticed that a kind of darkness that devoured the surrounding light gradually appeared around them. Even the brightness in the prison had decreased a lot. A shadow that was far taller than ordinary people slowly appeared in her field of vision. The shadow slowly turned around. Then she saw a pair of eyes that shone like flames in the inexplicable darkness. Bellatrix felt a powerful spirit rushing into her mind. She felt as if a cold tentacle had reached into her head. It could even be said that it was cold, chaotic, dark, and extremely evil. They whispered in her mind like some fragmented whispers. The violent mental impact caused her mouth and nose to bleed, but she did not care about it anymore. What really scared her and made her want to dig her brain out were the indescribable things that entered her mind. The sound of Mirko in the grand symphony of creation, the source of evil from another universe, the flower of evil that bloomed again after usurping the chaotic consciousness and dark and evil force of the will of the abyss in the world of Faerun. It was called the Abyss Whispers by the believers and priests of the gods. As a powerful evil god of the multiverse who carried an evil aura, an aura of fear and dark spiritual energy, the abyssal whispers that Morgoth carried was enough to brainwash the Empyrean gods and the benevolent races of the upper planes. Black blood oozed out from Bellatrix's facial orifices. Her body trembled violently. The after-effects of being tortured by the Dementors had made her a little insane. Rodolphius ran over in horror. He lifted her head with his trembling hands. But it was already too late. Bellatrix's fragile spirit had been tortured day and night in Azkaban. After the first wave of impact from the dark force and the evil aura, she had already suffered irreversible damage. It seems like the weak humans still find it difficult to look at my true face. Morgoth and Chin sighed. He retracted the undulations that he had unconsciously released. He walked out from the mass of darkness that looked like a human, but was actually just a mass of thick, impenetrable darkness. In order to prevent the prisoners of Azkaban from being driven mad by Morgatha's true face, he came in front of them in his human form. His face was exactly the same as Chin-Ang's, but they would not be mistaken as the same person. Morgatha's dark force, the aura of fear, was too strong for humans. It was like a piece of information that was difficult for the human consciousness to understand, but it was forced into their brains to understand. Compared to this pain, the information of appearance was too insignificant, so much so that it was often ignored. It was like an actor with superb acting skills. When playing different roles, people would often be confused by their temperament and forget that it was the same face. At this time, the prisoners of Azkaban broke free from the suffocating darkness that surrounded Morgoth. Bellatrix's constantly struggling and trembling body slowly calmed down, and Lebaston no longer twitched. At this time, the organized criminals imprisoned in Azkaban finally had the energy to look at this uninvited guest. Morgatha's gaze slid across their faces one by one. He whispered their names: Antonin Dolohov, Bellatrix Lestrange, Labasta Lestrange, Rodolphius Lestrange, Augustus Rookwood, Amicus Caro, Alecto Caro. There are a total of 28 pure-blood families in the British magic world. I see many people here. Some even have an entire family here. 28 purebloods. The reason why purebloods are called purebloods isn't because they have excellent bloodlines or are born with powerful magical powers. It's because they believe that they're more purebloods than others. I'm glad that none of you are indecisive. Pureblood families that sometimes agree and sometimes disagree. I've gathered 28 and a half summoned. Rodolphius Lestrange struggled to stand up. He looked at Chen Ong and asked in a low voice, "May I ask who you are, Your Excellency? You don't deserve to know my name." Morgoth glanced at Bellatrix, who was paralyzed on the ground, and nodded with a smile. "Unless you want to be like her. With your shallow power, the moment you look at me and hear my name, you will inevitably go crazy. So, you can follow the tradition here and call me Mystery Man. No, you don't deserve that title." Bellatrix, who was on the ground, seemed to have heard something. Her body instinctively struggled violently. She looked at Morgatha's face, even though her spirit had suffered irrecoverable damage. Half of it was madness, and the other half was due to some kind of obsession. She roared, "That title belongs to a great king, and his power is beyond your imagination. He is Mystery Man, and you are just a clown. A clumsy imitator." As soon as Bellatrix said this, the air in the cell became quiet. The Death Eaters were so silent that they almost suffocated. Among them, there were many reasons for becoming followers of Voldemort. There were the weak who sought protection from being bullied. There were those who worshipped power and only wanted to touch the prestige of the Dark Devil King. There were also those who were cruel and violent, who were attracted by a leader who could teach them a higher form of cruelty. They were all people who felt that they were getting weaker and weaker in the changing times of the magic world. They had one thing in common, which was that they felt mentally uncomfortable and lost their interests now that the mixed blood sorcerers were gradually dominating the development of the magic world. These people who lost their interests hoped to return to the past, to the time when they could do whatever they wanted with just a surname. They wanted to return to the time when pure-blooded magic world made them feel safe, powerful, and superior. At this time, Voldemort became the leader they elected, and they believed that Voldemort could give them the results they wanted. But now that Voldemort had failed once, many people had woken up from their momentary fanaticism and realized that Voldemort might not be able to give them what they wanted. The reason why the Death Eaters still maintained a complete organization was because they had nowhere else to go. Unless Voldemort returned, they would all be locked up in Azkaban until they died. At this time, Voldemort became a symbol of hope, and this leader was really cold-blooded and cruel, so cruel that even some Death Eaters found it cruel. They were afraid of his punishment and did not dare to disobey him. Old Malfoy's betrayal did not only represent him, but a large number of Death Eaters had the same thoughts. So, other than a lunatic like Bellatrix, they would rather not speak. Him? Morgoth laughed softly. "You mean Tom Riddle?" Chapter 773. Hearing that name, all the Death Eaters at the scene subconsciously stood up straight, while Bellatrix, who was already delirious and crazy, screamed, "How dare you! How dare you call out that name?" "Why wouldn't I dare?" Morgatha's voice was calm. "Is it because Tom Riddle cast a spell on the name, so that he could sense the person who said the name and appear in front of them with the phantom shift to bring them death? But he's already a dead dog now." Morgoth sighed and said, "The wizards are afraid of this name. Even after he died, they couldn't sense the location of the person who spoke the name through the magic spell. They agreed to call him the Mysterious Man and the person whose name cannot be spoken. In this regard, he did a good job. Voldemort is a person who knows how to use cruelty and fear to enslave people. just like how he enslaved you all. But fear can always be overshadowed by greater fear. Just like power can always be subdued by greater power. Some people with true beliefs, I respect them, and I don't think I can control them. Even if these beliefs are paranoid or distorted. For example, Dumbledore. But for those who submit to their own fear and the cruelty of others, I have confidence in controlling them. Because if they can submit to one dark devil, they can certainly submit to another. If they can kneel to a dark devil because of their strength and cruelty, then they can kneel at my feet, because I can always be stronger and crueler than others. Didn't you ask me who I am? Morgoth smiled. Morgoth. Divided into 3 steps, the tip of the tongue curls back, falls on the teeth, presses against the roof of the mouth, reverberates in the nasal cavity. Morgoth. His whisper rang in the ears of Bellatrix, who had already gone mad. Morgoth used Quenya to say the word that meant horror and darkness, then repeated it in the language of blasphemy, the language of the abyss and the common tongue, and finally in English. The true name was like a hyperlink. When it fell into Bellatrix's ears, it was like a key that opened the door to the bottomless abyss. She could not help but peep into the deep darkness and evil behind the name. A large amount of evil knowledge and dark power that she could not understand poured into her brain. The darkness from the owner of the name radiated like the abyss, polluting her soul. Bellatrix lost her voice completely. She looked at Morgoth's shadow standing in front of them, but through this shadow she saw the bottomless, dark abyss behind it. A large amount of dark red extravasated blood seeped out of her facial features. Her eyes became completely black, and her pupils and the whites of her eyes could not be seen. Her lips and nails turned black. Her mouth and nose were covered in blood, and the weak spots of her skin where the bloody light could be seen were all dark and purple. It was like the livor mortis under the skin after death. Bellatrix had begun to transform like an undead creature. The parts of her that were human were becoming less and less, and the parts that represented death and darkness had gradually begun to corrode her soul. Her husband, Rodolphus Lestrange, looked at all this in fear, but did not dare to approach her. He was afraid of the Dark Lord, so he turned a blind eye to the absurd behavior of his wife, who had been obsessed with Voldemort and even wanted to marry Voldemort. Deep in his heart, he was also afraid of Voldemort and even his wife, Bellatrix. He was very sure that if he betrayed Voldemort one day, Bellatrix would definitely skin him alive for Voldemort. In this fear, he called Voldemort our common leader and tried to convince himself that it was not fear, but that they all worshipped Voldemort fervently. But when facing Morgoth, he could no longer convince himself like this. Death Eaters had no loyalty. If there was anything, it could only be loyalty to benefits and power, because all of Voldemort's authority was built on his cruelty, madness, and strength. Once there was an existence that was more powerful and ruthless than Voldemort, their loyalty would be thinner than paper, weaker than even their chastity, and their knees would turn to jelly like noodles. So these loyal followers of Voldemort and cruel and ruthless Death Eaters, who were locked up in Azkaban, just quietly watched Morgoth torture Bellatrix. This most loyal follower of Voldemort acted as if they were a group of harmless Hogwarts first-year students. What have you been waiting for? You seem to be waiting for his return loyally. But I know that you are not waiting for him, but a hope that will allow you to turn over a new leaf. Because if there is no hope, you will be here, under the watch of the Soul Catcher, tortured to death. Morgoth sneered. You are like drowning people, tightly holding on to the last straw, and the name of this straw is Voldemort. You boast of your loyalty? No. I only see a group of red-eyed gamblers, fighting with everything they have. Morgoth raised his right hand, in which he held a small black leather book. As the person closest to Voldemort, you should know his soul vessel. The golden goblet for Hufflepuff, given to you by Voldemort, his most trusted Death Eater. Morgoth lowered his head and said to Bellatrix. Ravenclaw's crown, in the room of Hogwarts' absolute response. Slytherin's locket. Voldemort kept it in a cave by the sea he discovered when he was young, but it has been stolen, and is now hidden in the Black family's old house. Marvolo Gaunt's ring, embedded with a resurrection stone, hidden in the Gaunt family's old house. Nagini the Great Snake, still by Voldemort's side. Of course, and Harry Potter, the Savior's classmate, now studying at Hogwarts. Every time Morgoth mentioned the whereabouts of a soul vessel, the surrounding Death Eaters grew more fearful, and Bellatrix struggled even more violently, especially when Morgoth mentioned the Hufflepuff golden goblet that she had hidden. In the end, when Morgoth said the name of Harry Potter, most of the Death Eaters were at a loss, but a small portion of the truly intelligent ones were aghast. They didn't think that even Voldemort himself didn't know about this soul armament. Instead, they took it for granted that this was something Voldemort had set up before his death. It was to hide the last soul armament in the most unlikely place, and he didn't tell anyone about it. Morgoth held the black leather book in his hand and continued, "There's also Tom Riddle's diary when he was young. He gave it to one of his most important subordinates, Malfoy, as a reward. Now it's here." Morgoth raised the black leather book in his hand. On the cover, Voldemort's name was particularly glaring in the eyes of the Death Eaters. Morgoth came in front of Bellatrix and asked her in a low voice, "You think of yourself as Voldemort's most loyal follower and subordinate. Then, are you willing to pay a price so that Voldemort's soul fragment in this diary can be replenished with life force and be resurrected?" Bellatrix grabbed the diary in Morgoth's hand in a frenzy and laughed maniacally. "He will make you regret coming to these worlds." With that, she bit open the artery on her wrist with her teeth and sprayed fresh blood on the diary. She raised her head and laughed maniacally. "Come back, my master, come back. Let those who betrayed you pay the price. Let those who offend you never be reincarnated. Let those muggles and mudbloods die without a burial ground." The black leather notebook was soaked in blood, and the blood on its leather cover was rapidly disappearing as if it was devouring thirstily. The originally dry leather seemed to be full of blood and began to become moist and fresh. The black leather seemed to be alive, its texture becoming warm and full of moisture, like the skin of some creature. It began to open automatically, and the blank pages greedily sucked Bellatrix's blood. A line of words written in blood began to appear on it. Gradually, the words written in blood became impatient when no one responded for a long time. A wave of black magic that everyone present was very familiar with came from it, and it seemed to be invading Bellatrix's brain. Bellatrix did not resist at all, and just like that, she exposed the life force and soul of the words to Voldemort's soul fragment. However, the surrounding Death Eaters were already showing expressions of sympathy, as if there was some resonance between them. There was no doubt that Voldemort's soul fragment knew who was providing it with life force. Even if it did not know at the beginning, it should have been clear when it had begun to use black magic to recover its strength. But Voldemort was just so cold-blooded, greedily sucking the life force of his most loyal subordinate without the slightest hesitation. Even though Bellatrix was on the verge of death and could die at any time, Voldemort, who seemed to know something from Bellatrix's memory, showed an imposing manner that would not stop until he squeezed Bellatrix dry. He also wanted to squeeze out Bellatrix's soul and memory, but Bellatrix, who had seen Morgoth's true face and knew his real name, had a large part of her soul contaminated. Voldemort was afraid of this power that would contaminate her soul, so he preserved a part of her soul and memory. Thick black mist rose from the cover of the notebook, and the black magic on it provided Voldemort's soul with considerable power. A very young, or even handsome, young man appeared in front of everyone. He looked at Morgoth as if he wanted to show off his glib tongue. This was a soul fragment of Voldemort when he was young. Unlike Voldemort, who later became cruel, violent, and crazy because he split his soul to create a soul fragment, this soul fragment was more intelligent and rational. It inherited Voldemort's forbearance and cleverness during his time at Hogwarts, and was even somewhat calm when facing Morgoth. Chapter 774. Morgoth looked at the young Tom Riddle and said calmly, "Very good. Compared to people like Dumbledore, it should be easier for the two of us to communicate with each other. Because compared to those who believe in love, and those who are obsessed with their own ideals, people who believe in power are easier to convince. Just like when Dumbledore first saw you, he used his power to make you admit your mistakes, right?" Morgoth laughed. What a hypocritical person! To a child full of suspicion and born cruel, Dumbledore chose to threaten and use violence to warn you and make you admit your mistakes. From this, Dumbledore is a hypocritical and smart person. Morgoth smiled. He saw through your nature at a glance and chose to use your own method to warn you. This proves 2 points. Dumbledore believes that you are a born cruel person, or rather, he believes that some people are born kind saviors, and some people are born to be the dark devil. This is different from what he claims. Many of the professors at Hogwarts believe that you have become like this because they have not given you enough love. But Dumbledore claims that you are just born evil and cruel. So when he first saw you in the orphanage, he burned a wardrobe in front of you, using the fierceness and violence of the fire to make you admit your mistakes. As for the Savior who is prophesied to end you, he placed him in an environment even colder and crueler than the one you were in the orphanage, letting him grow up in cold violence and contempt. Just because you are the dark devil and he is the Savior. Although wizards do not believe in religion, Dumbledore's views are the same as those Western Muggles who believe in Christianity. They all advocate something above man. For Muggles, that is God, but for Dumbledore, I do not know what it is. It may be fate or it may be some kind of philosophy. They believe that everything operates under a certain philosophy that God, or Dumbledore, believes in. Good and evil are inborn, prophecies are predetermined, and human nature has been determined before he was born. For example, you are Voldemort and Harry Potter is the Savior. In a sense, what Dumbledore believes in is even more rotten than your bloodline theory. Tom Riddle laughed. His temperament was elegant and calm, and his every move was more noble than those purebloods who claimed to be born nobles. It was no wonder that those purebloods would worship such a mudborn as their leader. Of course, the real reason was Voldemort's power, but it was also related to his bewitching temperament. Tom Riddle was easy to like when he was patient and in disguise. This was completely different from the madness and irritation, as well as the ferociousness and cruelty that he revealed after he split his 7 soul fragments. Both Chin Ong and Morgoth believed that no one was born evil, but it was difficult for them to not be evil when they placed their soul fragments on items that had been enchanted with the Black Devil King and exposed their souls to the darkness, agitation, and distortion of black magic for a long time. Furthermore, what was the difference between letting the soul leave the protection of the body and coming into contact with chaotic and distorted magic power and the candy that eaters always gave out? Voldemort had endured until now to show signs of madness, which was a testament to the strength of his will and the determination of his heart. Morgoth admired this kind of madman who pursued eternal life. In the words of a martial cultivator, this was also a certain degree of firmness in the heart of the Tao. Tom Riddle said in a low voice, "I'm glad that someone saw through Dumbledore's hypocritical face like me. Dumbledore believes that there is absolute good and evil in this world, but I don't think there is absolute good and evil in this world. The difference is only between the strong and the weak who can't tell the truth. In this sense, Dumbledore is a strong person, but he always indulges in the will of the weak." "So you're very regretful?" Morgoth asked in return. He shook his head and said, "No, Dumbledore is just insisting on his own will. Many people think that he stands on the side of the weak, but in fact, he is like us, standing on his own side, carrying out his own will, not be moved by others." "Do you think that Dumbledore is succumbing to the will of those people?" "In fact, he is driving them to carry out his will." Dumbledore and you are both very good at grasping the weakness of the weak. You grasp their fear, and Dumbledore grasps their love. So, Snape once succumbed to you. Tom Riddle, no, it should be Voldemort laughed heartily. He nodded and said, yes, we are all experts. It's just that our goals are different. What I pursue, as my name says, is Voldemort, surpassing death, achieving eternity, and ruling over everything. And Dumbledore, he is too weak. What he pursues is actually a pair of woolen socks. In English, woolen socks refer to kinship or love. But in the process of carrying out our will, we are equally ruthless. This should be the reason why we are strong. But at this moment, Morgoth laughed coldly. Strong? He asked in return, then laughed. No, no, to these people. He drew a circle on the heads of the Death Eaters with his wand and said, you may be called strong, but now I am here. And you or Dumbledore are actually no different from them. Both are weak. Mental retardation. Morgoth did not even wave his wand. Instead, he calmly uttered these two words and cast a classic arcane spell on Voldemort. The arcane energy absorbed from the Well of Eternity turned into a circle of green light that appeared out of thin air and wrapped around Voldemort. His exquisite arcane control suppressed part of the effect of mental retardation, so that Voldemort would not really become mentally retarded. He only extracted all of Voldemort's wisdom and memories. Among all the living beings in the world of magic, only your ideals count. Morgoth nodded and smiled as he pointed at Tom Riddle. A wizard who can't even defeat a monster without his wand can only be called strong in front of you, Morgoth said as he glanced at the trembling Death Eaters. I didn't ask you to come out to discuss your weak and laughable beliefs with you, but to make my authority deeper and more firmly rooted in their hearts. I want these ants to experience deep fear whenever they think of me in their insignificant and short lives. Morgotha's whispers echoed in everyone's ears. Now you still don't know who you're facing. But you'll know soon enough. Morgoth raised his wand and whispered to Voldemort, who had a look of disbelief and hatred, malicious transformation. In the invisible force field of arcane control, Tom Riddle's body suddenly twisted. His face contorted in fear, but he could not struggle at all as he turned into a big black dog. I hope Sirius will like you now, Morgoth said coldly to the black dog that Voldemort had turned into. He glanced at Gru behind him. Gru, who had turned into Bwajin, trembled and took out a bottle of powerful aphrodisiac in fear. Voldemort, who had turned into a big black dog, struggled violently, but Gru, who was afraid of Morgoth, pressed him down ferociously and poured the aphrodisiac into Voldemort's mouth. Send it to Sirius, Morgoth said indifferently. I'm giving Sirius a chance to take revenge with his own hands. I hope he doesn't hate me. Not everyone has the chance to be the Dark Devil's man. The last person who did this was Albus Dumbledore. Voldemort, who had turned into a big black dog, widened his eyes. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Morgoth with extreme hatred. Morgoth lowered his head and said to him, Hate me? Your hatred will give you strength. As long as a part of your soul remains in the soul vessel, you will not be able to resist me. Pain and hatred will make you realize that you're still a weakling. Work hard to become stronger. At least get the Black Scripture of the Dead, and retrieve your lost soul fragment. Otherwise, you'll have to taste the humiliation of being manipulated by others again. You should be thankful that Sirius is imprisoned here. Otherwise, a real dog would make you the laughingstock of the entire world of magic. Look, Chen-Ong pointed at the Death Eaters. They looked at Chen-Ong with incomparable fear in their eyes. To the sensitive Voldemort, there was no longer the respect and fear in their eyes. Instead, there was a hint of strangeness. Morgoth laughed softly. Look at them. Who would still fear you? Who would still be willing to be loyal to you from the bottom of their hearts? This is what I want. They will submit to power, submit to me. Morgoth turned his head and berated. Kneel? A Death Eater with disheveled hair and a dirty face was the first to kneel hesitantly, followed by the second. Gradually, the speed at which they knelt became faster and faster. There were fewer and fewer people standing. After a while, there was not a single Death Eater left standing in front of Voldemort. They knelt in the cell. Morgoth waved his wand in his hand, and the dark devil mark on the Death Eater's left wrists suddenly appeared. The Death Eaters felt a sharp pain, as if their flesh was being gouged out. All of their dark devil marks disappeared, and in exchange, their right hands felt as if they were being scorched by hot iron. An active fire dragon mark slowly entrenched itself on their right arms, swimming towards their hearts. "Hate me?" Morgoth smiled. "Your eyes are very powerful now. This is what I want." Morgoth turned to the former Death Eaters and said, "You're loyal to the Dark Devil King, not Voldemort. That's good, I don't have to go on a killing spree. Although you can work for me whether you're alive or dead, I still hope that I can have some living people under me. Wizards, not house pets or undead creatures." He turned around and returned Gru to its original form. "If anyone disobeys my order, I won't give him a second chance. I'll turn him or her into a house elf, just like Bujin Bok." Hearing him say Gru's name, a low gasp came from the former Death Eaters. Morgoth coldly extended his wand and turned the former Death Eater, who made the sound, into an equally ugly house pet. The powerful power of baleful polymorph immediately took root in all the former Death Eaters. "Master!" The house pet screamed frantically. "Master, no, please, Master." But Gru quickly phased back and took him away. "You see, loyalty is cheap." Morgoth laughed softly. The Death Eaters below were even more frightened and frightened. All of them knelt on the ground, not daring to make a sound. "Now, the Dark Devil you are loyal to is me, Morgoth. As the new Dark Devil King, I order you to contact your companions who are not in Azkaban, inform them of this change, and bring them here. If they do not obey, then use the power of the mark I gave you to bring them here by force. This mark is called the Star of Mirko. Through this mark, you can sense the power of the Star of Mirko in the sky. This power allows you to contact me and borrow my power." Chapter 775. School had already started at Hogwarts, and Harry Potter had been annoyed to death by Lockhart for the past few days. He did not even have time to flip through the Golden Book. Furthermore, he had too many roommates: Ron, Neville Longbottom, Seamus Finnegan, and Dean Thomas. He did not have the slightest bit of freedom. For some reason, he did not even want to share the book with Ron. Perhaps it was because he had used dishonorable means to obtain this book. Furthermore, based on Harry's understanding of Ron, if he saw a magic book made of gold, he would shout that the whole of Gryffindor would know. Harry was deeply disturbed by his previous behavior, as if he had been possessed. In terms of material, the Book of the Golden Sun was worth a lot of money. Just the gold alone was worth a lot of gold coins. He hesitated to return the book or give it to Dumbledore, but every time he took a short moment to sneak a peek at the Book of the Golden Sun he had hidden under his pillow, the light refracted from the golden pages reflected off his glasses, and there was a voice in his heart telling him to give it a try. At this time, it would always remind him of the illusions he had seen in the magic mirror of Eris. That day, Lockhart once again made a mess of the class. Harry was tired of dealing with both Colin and Lockhart during the day, and he had already made a detour to avoid Lockhart in the corridor whenever he saw him. But Colin Creevey was hard to avoid. He seemed to have memorized Harry's class schedule. Every time they met, Colin would respectfully and adore him, saying, "Hello, Harry." He had to reply "Hello, Colin" 6 or 7 times a day, and Harry was bored to death. That night, after his roommates had gone to bed, Harry could no longer suppress his pounding heart. He put down the curtains and took out the Book of the Golden Sun from under his pillow. He pulled out his wand and whispered to the book, "Fluorescent twinkle." The white light at the tip of the wand shone on the Book of the Golden Sun, and the magic book reflected a brilliant light. This light flowed along the pages, and although it was not dazzling, it had a kind of splendor. The golden light revealed a kind of sacred, eternal charm. Between the floating golden Egyptian hieroglyphs, a poem of the gods was narrated. The page of the golden book that Harry flipped through was engraved with a hymn to the sun god. Praise thee, Allah, thy amazing ascent. You rise, shine, and cause the heavens to roll to one side. You are the king of the gods, the master of all things. We come from you, we are made holy by you. Thy priests go forth at dawn, and wash their hearts with mirth. The sacred wind blows upon your golden strings with music. At sunset, they embrace you, like every cloud. From thy wings shines the color of the horizon. There was no doubt that this was a poem praising Ra, the sun god, but Harry could not figure out what it had to do with magic, let alone the secret of resurrection magic. Unwilling to give up, he turned 2 more pages. This, Rise of the Dead, Praise the Sun, actually had 3 pages in the book. He racked his brains but could not find any clue from it. Harry was extremely disappointed. He closed the book in frustration and muttered, "This could be a hoax, just as Malfoy's father said. Could it be a tool that Boggin, the owner of the black magic shop, uses to trick the Muggles? Or maybe I don't understand ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs at all. Maybe Hermione can. She's Miss Know-it-all." He was about to put the golden book under his pillow, but as soon as he touched the pillow, he bounced off the bed like a spring. He was so excited that he could not speak coherently. "But I can't understand those weird hieroglyphs at all," he muttered to himself. "Then how do I know the meaning of the poem engraved on it?" Harry took out the golden book again. He was sure that he was unfamiliar with the words written on it, but when the words flowed in the golden light, he inexplicably understood its meaning. It all happened so naturally that he could not react for a moment. He prepared to recite the hymn-like incantation, but just as he was about to recite it, he heard the sound of Ron grinding his teeth. Harry picked up the golden book of the sun, and found the invisibility cloak nearby. He decided to go to the abandoned classroom where he had found the mirror of Eris. He sneaked out of the dormitory, down the stairs, through the common room, and climbed over the portly lady's portrait hole. When he returned to the abandoned classroom, the mirror of Eris had disappeared. But the desks and chairs in the corner, and the overturned wastepaper basket, were still there. The moonlight shone into the abandoned classroom, allowing Harry to see everything clearly even without the light. Harry was lost in thought as he looked at the place where the mirror of Eris had visited. It was one of the places he was most familiar with. During those few nights, he came here every night and stared at the mirror for a long time. He opened the golden book of the sun, in the moonlight, and turned to the page where the poem Rise of the Dead, Praise the Sun was recorded. In the moonlight, the light flowing on the golden book was a little cold. It was different from the golden color that Harry had seen during the day, and also different from the dark gold that had just been cast by the fluorescent spell. Now the book was flowing with a platinum brilliance. Harry cleared his throat, lowered his voice, and chanted instinctively, "Praise thee, Allah, to thy amazing rise. Thou art rising, shining, and making the heavens roll aside. Thou art the King of the gods, the Lord of all. We come from thee, and because of thee we are holy. Thou didst pass the zenith, and thy heart rejoiceth. Thy boat of dawn and of dusk have fair winds. Before thee Mat lifteth up her fateful plume, and the halls of Anu are tumultuous with thy name. O thou perfect God, eternal God, and only God! The great eagle that soars with the rising sun. On the green fig tree, thy ever-young image shines across the heart of the heavenly river. Thy light shines on every face, and no one knows it. For thousands of years thou art the source of new life." Harry had learned ancient Egyptian without a teacher, and he sang in a long priestly tone with a hint of holiness. It was very strange in the abandoned classroom at night. Gradually, Harry's body became transparent, and he entered a dark, cold world. Everything around him began to become colder. Except for the moonlight, Everything lost some of its luster. If Harry looked straight, he could even see that the scenery around him was a bit distorted, as if it was in a mirror. But he did not notice it now. He was completely immersed in the golden book of the sun. His voice unconsciously became high-pitched, like the grand chant of the priests in ancient Egypt. It echoed in the empty corridors of Hogwarts. In the distance, Mischievous screamed excitedly, "Little devil! There's a little devil who's not sleeping, but wandering the corridors at night." Mischievous took the lead and flew towards the source of the sound. Filch and his cat followed at a distance. Mischievous broke into the abandoned classroom and did not know what he had interrupted. Chapter 776. The interrupted Harry woke up with a start. He had only glanced back unconsciously, but the light from his eyes had severely injured Naughty. This made Harry very afraid. He tucked the book under his armpit, ready to put on the invisibility cloak and run back, but Filch had already rushed in. Harry's heart seemed to stop beating. He thought in despair, "It's over. I'm going to be fired." The thought of leaving Hogwarts and going back to his uncle made Harry feel an indescribable pain in his heart. But what happened next surprised him. Filch acted as if he didn't see him, staring blankly at the empty space around him. Suddenly, Filch smiled and whispered, "Harry Potter and your invisibility cloak? You can't escape from me," Filch said. He opened his hands and reached forward. He also blocked the door tightly. It looked like he was going to fish in the river. Harry tensed up again. Filch was like a skinny monkey, waving his hands towards him. Harry had nowhere to hide. He was forced into a corner. Filch seemed to have confirmed his prey's location and pounced on him. Harry closed his eyes nervously, but all he heard was a cry of pain. Filch crashed into the wall. His nose seemed to be crooked from the impact. Harry opened his eyes and was shocked to see that half of Filch's hand was still waving at his chest, but it had passed through like a phantom. The old squib yelled angrily, "Who is it? Who is it?" Harry didn't dare to delay. He rushed to the door. The walls and doors seemed to be no obstacle in front of him. He easily passed through them. At this time, Harry realized that there was something wrong with the world he was in. It was as if there was a layer of glass between them. The world in his eyes was dark, distorted, and even lost some of its warmth and color. He easily passed through the material and even walked towards Snape's chest. He made a face at Snape. Snape looked up, as if he had noticed something. Filch walked out with his cat and said to Snape in a low voice, "Professor, someone was just wandering around here at night. He also attacked Naughty. I don't know where Naughty is now." Filch's pale and thin face was full of fear. His nose was a little crooked. But his cat, Madame Dolores, was furious. "Meow!" Madame Dolores screamed mournfully. This small, scrawny animal with dark gray fur stared nervously in the direction where Harry Potter was hiding. "It seems to be frightened," Filch nervously explained to Snape. "Because half of Harry Potter and Snape's bodies overlap." It looked as though Lady Dolores was shouting at Snape. Snape glanced at Madame Lolis thoughtfully. He raised his head and observed his surroundings keenly. His brows furrowed deeply, and his greasy hair almost fell on Harry Potter's face. Filch was horrified as he prepared to carry the mournful wailing little animal. It was so nervous that it was trembling. Harry saw that Madame Dolores was staring into his eyes, and realized that Madame Dolores could see him. Previously, he thought that Madame Dolores was also afraid of that old bat. "Professor," Filch seemed to want to explain. Snape raised his hand to stop him from continuing. He said in a low voice, "Maybe it's not the bat's problem. Legend has it that cats are wizards' best friends, because they can always discover things that wizards can't see. These black magic creations are very dangerous to wizards, so many wizards like to keep cats as a precaution." "Then what could these black magic creations be?" Filch asked fawningly. "Does it have anything to do with what just happened?" "It's usually spirits and magical creatures that are harmful to muggles and sorcerers." Although we can see some of the spirits, there are some dangerous evil spirits created by black magic that even sorcerers can't see. They are evil, bloodthirsty, and very dangerous. They walk in a world called the spirit realm. Legend has it that this is the place that souls must pass to return to their home. In order to create these undetectable evil killers, some dark wizards torture muggles and even wizards, using black magic to curse their souls so that these souls can't go deeper into the spirit realm. They can only wander between the spirit realm and the human world, becoming their weapons. In order to prevent the evil spirits from attacking them, the dark wizards would keep a cat. Because cats also walk between life and death, they can see the evil spirits hidden in the spirit realm, so that they can be wary of these monsters. Spirit realm? Harry seemed to understand something. He quietly retreated, and Madame Dolores couldn't see him. He also gradually calmed down. Snape looked behind him suspiciously, but Harry had already walked far away. His mind was filled with confusion. Am I in the spirit realm now? The power of the sun-golden scripture brought me here? How do I get out? Is what Snape said true? The spirit realm is a journey back to the home of reincarnation, so that book can bring people back to the home of their souls, then bring them back to our world and resurrect them? Thinking of this, Harry tightened his grip on the sun-golden scripture in his arms. When he passed by the headmaster's office, he thought for a moment, then quietly walked in. He didn't know what he wanted to do, to chat with Dumbledore, or to tell him about the sun-golden scripture. He quietly crawled into the headmaster's office through the wall, and to his surprise, Dumbledore was still inside. Under the illumination of the fireplace, the lighting in the room fluctuated. It was already the wee hours of the morning, and the portraits of the previous headmasters were dozing off in their respective frames. Professor Dumbledore was sitting in front of his desk with his fingers crossed, looking at a visitor from the Ministry of Magic in front of him. He said in a low voice, "We've lost contact with Azkaban?" The gentleman in front of him said, "Yes, if what Sirius said is true, a group of dark wizards attacked Azkaban the day before yesterday. We have no way of contacting Azkaban now. That area of the sea has been cast with powerful dark magic. Sirens sing amidst the strong winds and waves, dementors dance in the wind and rain, and a large number of ghost ships appear in the fog, filled with evil spirits and water demons. Azkaban has been hidden by someone, and the auras can't fight against the dementors, water demons, and sirens in such harsh sea conditions. And we have to guard against the Death Eaters who escaped. Someone has already seen them in Knockout Alley. The one who attacked Azkaban wasn't Voldemort?" Dumbledore lit his pipe. "Yes," Sirius said, "it was someone else who couldn't be named. Voldemort's soul vessel suffered a crushing defeat in his hands. But strangely, he didn't seem to want to talk about it. But we can't ask him. Some people in the Ministry think that we can't trust the words of a Death Eater, the Black Devil's loyal lackey. This must be another conspiracy by the Death Eaters, so that everyone won't forget the mysterious person who has already died. Although people say that Sirius betrayed his best friend, I believe that there must be a hidden story behind it. I've always advocated for this case to be handled with caution, but no one in the Ministry of Magic listened to me." The person in front of him said awkwardly, "This, after all, Sirius has admitted it himself." "I want to see his letter," Dumbledore said. "Please wait a moment. Mr. Fudge will send it to you in a moment." Sirius' letter described the Dark Wizard as incomparably terrifying. He said that he had cruelly killed the Black Devil's most loyal follower, Bellatrix Lestrange, and enslaved her soul, transforming her into a banshee. It's a newly created magical creature of black magic. The souls of witches are imprisoned in their corpses, and transformed under the magic power of the full moon. And the Death Eaters who surrendered to him were bestowed with powerful black magic power. This is indirectly proven. We accidentally caught traces of Rabaston Lestrange in that area of the sea. His black magic power was stronger than we expected. Under the siege of 7 auras, he heavily injured 3 of them, killed 1 aura, and left unharmed. Chapter 777. At this moment, a person that Harry Potter did not expect barged in. He glanced at the gentleman from the Ministry of Magic. His eyes were narrow and cold under his greasy black hair. The Ministry of Magic's envoy wisely kept his mouth shut. He did not want to say anything in front of Snape. If not for Dumbledore testifying for him, Snape would have long been locked up in Azkaban. At that time, the Death Eater that Voldemort trusted the most was not Bellatrix, but Snape. Snape swept his gaze across the headmaster's office. Harry hurriedly hid himself well. Even though Snape could not see him, he still hid under the rows of bookshelves in the headmaster's office. He quickly realized that this was a wise move, because Snape was following behind Filch, and he was still carrying the cat. Headmaster! Snape saw that Madame Dolores did not have any unusual behavior, so he said to Dumbledore, "I would like to invite you over. The school might have been invaded." The Ministry of Magic's envoy almost jumped up. He said nervously, "It must be them. Headmaster Dumbledore. It must be those Death Eaters." Snape stared at him. His gloomy eyes made the Ministry of Magic's envoy's hair stand on end. He used his usual deep voice to ask, "What happened that I don't know about?" He looked at Dumbledore and said in a low voice, "You promised to tell me about him." Dumbledore stood up and said to the Ministry of Magic's envoy, "Mr. Weitzman, I will definitely carefully consider the matter you tell me. Now there is a problem in the school that requires me to solve it. So I will not be sending you out." The Ministry of Magic's envoy hurriedly stood up, and after bidding farewell to Dumbledore, he glanced at Snape and walked out of the headmaster's office with a face full of suspicion. Filch also followed him out after Dumbledore signaled him to. Only Dumbledore and Snape were left in the headmaster's office, while Harry hid in a corner and listened to their conversation quietly. Dumbledore's beard reached his chest. He stood up, and because he was too tall, he had to lower his head slightly to look at Snape at the same level. His eyes peeked out from the gap above the lenses, staring at Snape. "Severus, I don't remember you being such an impetuous person." Snape laughed coldly. "I've always been like this." Although he said that, he still calmed down and said in a low voice, "Malfoy. Malfoy has some problems. Recently, he has been asking me questions about black magic. It's very advanced black magic, including how to enslave a soul, how to resurrect a dead person." Harry's heart almost stopped when he heard this. His mind was in a whirl. He felt that he had learned a very important secret of Malfoy's. Snape could not know, because he had not heard what Malfoy had said at Borgins. Harry was sure that Malfoy had gone back to the dark magic shop. He could not buy the Golden Book of the Sun, because he had taken it with him. But he must have gotten his hands on some dark magic gadget. For the first time, Harry was glad that he had chosen to steal the book, or it would have fallen into Malfoy's hands. His youthful sense of justice diluted the uneasiness in his heart. "So you suspect that Malfoy got his hands on the Horcrux hidden in Malfoy's house, and he is under Voldemort's control?" Dumbledore asked. There was the sound of a spell being chanted in an abandoned classroom in the east, and Mischievous was injured because of it. "You should know that not all magic can harm a spirit." Filch must have barged in immediately after Mischievous was injured, but there was no one inside. He also did not manage to touch someone who might have used the disillusionment curse or the invisibility cloak. "I suspect it's a demon, an evil spirit." Dumbledore shook his head. "You should know how much old Malfoy loves his child. He would never let Dracula get hurt, even if it was his life. That's why I did not send him to Azkaban. He is different from most Death Eaters. His love for his family is more than anything else." "So you're hoping that this will make him betray Voldemort one day and join your side?" Snape mocked sharply. "Just like me." Dumbledore looked at him in silence and said sincerely, "People make choices for love. They do not join me, but choose love. I believe that anyone who truly loves someone will eventually part ways with Voldemort, because Death Eaters only have hatred in their hearts, while Voldemort only wants to surpass death. I did not choose you, but you chose me. You will drag him into that vortex, Snape said angrily. I am his godfather after all. Old Malfoy's stupidity should not be borne by him. So please help him. Snape looked at Dumbledore pleadingly. Save him? Dumbledore said solemnly, I will protect every one of my students. Remember your promise. Snape said in a low voice. Dumbledore continued, The Ministry of Magic told me that Azkaban has been conquered, and they are powerless now. There might be a very powerful dark wizard controlling Azkaban, enslaving the Soul Eaters and Death Eaters there. Even Bellatrix died in his hands, and one of Voldemort's soul vessels fell into his hands. Voldemort has finally met his match this time. His soul vessels filled with dark magic have finally met someone who can break through its defenses and control his soul fragments. That's really a ruthless character, Snape said happily, and he even smiled for the first time in a long time. But we also have to be vigilant. Voldemort will definitely return, and we have met a new opponent. This opponent is still very unfamiliar, and I still don't know too many things. But to be able to make a large number of Death Eaters betray Voldemort, just like you said, that person is really a ruthless character. Come with me to have a check. I hope Malfoy did not mess up too badly. Now tell me about Malfoy. I have been paying less and less attention to the school recently. Voldemort's matters have taken up too much of my energy. After all, I am only an old man. Malfoy revealed very little. I can only be sure that he is in contact with some very advanced dark magic, including controlling spirits, resurrecting the dead, creating mummies and enslaving souls, even involving immortality. Just the things he revealed made me feel afraid. You should know that magic that involves the soul is very rare, and it is either powerful white magic or terrifying dark magic. His magic is getting stronger by the day. Now he is not inferior to some adult magi. Chapter 778. Autumn in Nivea Peninsula had started to turn gloomy and cold. There was almost no sunlight in this season, and the shorter and shorter days caused the place to feel dark and gloomy. Durmstrang Magic School was located here. It was located in the middle of the towering mountains, and next to a lake that looked like clear water. The tall four-story castle was not as tall as the Hogwarts Gothic buildings, but it was much more solid. The style of the castle in Lord of the Rings was closer to that of Chin Ang's taste. The gray granite walls were embedded in the rocks, giving off a heavy and reliable feeling. Durmstrang had a swift and fierce style of study. The students here wore gray leather robes and had green stubble on their heads. Even though it's a German-speaking magic school, it feels like a Russian, Chen Ong commented. Durmstrang was a magic school that taught black magic, and its headmaster was a convicted Death Eater. It was only because he had reached an agreement with Crouch, the former director of the Magic Law Enforcement Department, before he was sentenced, that he was able to escape with his life. Therefore, this person was also afraid of Voldemort. A former Death Eater like him could become the headmaster of Durmstrang. This showed how much this magic school indulged in this aspect. Chen Ong liked this kind of indulgence. As the third Dark Devil, Durmstrang was undoubtedly the most suitable place to develop backup organizations and members. Perhaps Chen Ong could already control Hogwarts, but it was a magic school after all, and not a military camp or government. Terrifying and oppressive measures were not suitable to be implemented there. Perhaps the students of Slytherin would welcome Morgoth as ruler, but Gryffindor would definitely be against it, and the other two academies would most likely resist passively. What could Chen Ong do? Kill them all? Even Morgoth felt that it was too much. Furthermore, these students had their families, their social class, and their interests. This meant that most of the students of Hogwarts would not easily side with the Dark Magi. Things need to be done slowly. Rather than forcefully controlling that place and using blood and terror to dominate Hogwarts, why don't we wait for it to ferment on its own and change it from within? Seeds need soil and time to sprout. I've already planted 3 seeds there, and they will change everything. The Golden Sun Scripture and the Black Scripture of the Dead. This is the clash of fate. Harry Potter and Malfoy Dracula, Dumbledore and Voldemort, and Snape who hovers between the two. Standing on the top of Durmstrang Castle, Chen Ong looked down from a tower surrounded by huge glass windows. The students of Durmstrang Magic School were playing with each other in their leather hats and coats, full of joy and liveliness. The Death Eaters had already invited Igor Kakarov over for him. Following the sound of footsteps, Yaxley, a Death Eater who had just defected to Morgoth, carefully pushed open the door and entered. Behind him were 2 Death Eaters holding Igor Kakarov. He looked terrified and his legs were weak. The 2 Death Eaters had to support him from both sides to prevent him from being paralyzed on the ground. He was sweating profusely, and the small curly goatee that he had carefully maintained was stuck to his chin in a mess. Seeing Chen Ong, his usually mellow, melodious, and passionate voice became frightened. He said with a trembling voice, "Spare me. I didn't mean to betray the Dark Devil King. That's just what the Ministry of Magic said to slander me. I've always been loyal to the Dark Devil King, controlling this magic school for him." Chen Ong slowly turned around. Igor was a little surprised to see this strange Easterner, but he quickly came to his senses. It was normal for anyone to be Voldemort's follower. Could this person be a wizard from a Japanese pureblood family? Yaxley was very clear about Chen Eng's identity and the difference between Chen Ong and Morgoth. He lowered his head and said, "Sir Envoy, we've already taken control of the other professors. The Dark Wizards are very sensible." "Sensible?" Chen Ong smiled and said, "Of course, the Dark Wizards know to yield to power. I hope the pureblood families in Northern Europe can do the same. Have you taken control of the school board?" "I'm calling them over." Chen Ong looked at the battered Igor and said in a low voice, "You don't have to be so afraid of me, because I'm not the follower of the Dark Devil King that you're afraid of. I'm not Voldemort's follower. I'm the envoy of the new Dark Devil King, and Voldemort is already a dead dog. So they," Chen Ong pointed around and said, "have all sided with the new Dark Devil King. He has no entanglement with you, and doesn't care who you betrayed, because he's not the one you betrayed." Igor heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. He knew that there was no way he could survive in front of Voldemort. The Black Devil could not tolerate anyone who betrayed him, but if it was the new Black Devil, things would be much easier to deal with. Igor smiled and said, "I'm willing to serve the Dark Devil King." Chen Ong was quite satisfied with his adaptability. He laughed and said in a low voice, "You're very smart. Although you didn't betray the new Dark Devil King, he still has a group of Death Eaters under him who you tricked into Azkaban. Without his protection, you'll definitely die. Only under his protection can you avoid their vengeance. According to common sense, even if your betrayal has nothing to do with him, the Dark Devil King will still kill you to appease his betrayed and tortured subordinate. But you're very lucky, because the new Dark Devil King doesn't care what the former Death Eaters under him think. He only cares what they do. Those people fear him like a demon king. Similarly, he doesn't care what you think, but what you choose. Submit or die." Igor's body went limp and he said timidly, "Submit. I want to control this magic school and practice the Dark Devil King's ideas. You'll still be the headmaster, but just do your job well. I want you to contact Hogwarts and initiate an exchange program for Durmstrang and Hogwarts to exchange teaching. You don't have to worry about the Nordic Ministry of Magic, they'll soon adapt. Someone from the British Ministry of Magic is also going to mediate, and you'll soon get permission to apply to Dumbledore for an exchange between the two schools. In the future, I'll be in charge of Durmstrang's daily teaching, and you'll be in charge of external communication and mediating. I'll give you advice on the key points. Chapter 779. Did you know? There's a new professor in our school. Really? But it's already been a few weeks since school started. Which class is it? I heard it's black magic class. Low murmurs could be heard in the corridors of Durmstrand Castle. Durmstrand was a school that taught black magic. However, even in Durmstrand, there was an unclear boundary to the black magic curriculum. Due to the most basic rationality, Durmstrand would not teach overly dangerous black magic. Some top-notch black magic was also a taboo in Durmstrand. But after Chen Ong came, it was not necessarily the case. Students of Durmstrand, dressed in brown leather robes, were rushing from the dormitory to the classroom. The black magic class taught by Chen Ong was a big class for the whole year. Regardless of the school, the whole year had to attend. They were also eager to know what the new black magic teacher was like. Chen Ong stood in front of the wall where Gellert Grindelwald had left the symbol of the sacred relic of death. Because of the curse left by the first dark devil, the school had not eradicated it. And now that Igor Kakarov was the headmaster, it was hard to say if Durmstrand would remove the symbol. Looking at the elder symbol on the wall that represented the old wand, Chen Ong could feel that there was indeed a trace of the power of the sacred relic of death here. But then again, even if the sacred relic of death was here, this kind of sacred relic, that could break Harry Potter with a single stroke, was not something that Chen Ong cared about, let alone a mere symbol. This wall was hidden in a relatively remote corridor due to the school's dark magic class. It was not far from the classroom where Chen Ang's black magic class was held. Therefore, when he saw that it was almost time for class, Chen Ong turned around and walked out of the classroom. The black magic class was held in a dungeon because the black magic class in Durmstrand Magic Academy was also a dual class to a certain extent. In fact, the reason why this place was notorious among the 13 magic academies was because its second headmaster, Harfang Mont, established the tradition of duels and combat magic for Durmstrand. That was why, even though all the magic schools had eliminated black magic, they still retained this controversial curriculum. The atmosphere in the dungeon was gloomy and terrifying. Some black magic items were placed on the shelves on both sides. When Chen Ong walked in, the classroom was completely silent. This was because his oriental face was very unfamiliar to the students. They instinctively kept silent. It was unknown whether it was because of Detzi's inflexibility, Russian's combat intuition, or simply the alertness and sensitivity of a small animal. These students might have sensed the deep and bone-chilling cold aura emanating from Chen Ong. "You're here to learn magic." Chen Ang's good teacher, Professor Snape, made a brief opening speech. "I don't care how you're waving your wand stupidly, and I don't want to listen to you suggesting that this is against the law, that this is too cruel, this kind of sissy opinion. For the rest of the lesson, I hope to hear, 'Yes, Professor,' or 'Hurrah.' I even loathe those so-called, according to personality, ideals, or any other messy things planned to assign students to academies. So, in my opinion, your academy doesn't exist. The only one that exists is the academy that I assign to you. You're all pure-blooded, so according to tradition, the method of assigning academies here is bloodline." Chen Ong waved his wand lightly, changing everyone's school uniform, the Russian-style gray leather robes into pure white leather jackets. Then, 2 different glass vessels appeared on the table. One was a white glass traditional-style wine bottle, and the other was a brown glass short-mouthed bottle. Another curious student rushed to open the 2 bottles. A strong smell of alcohol assaulted their nostrils. The Russian speakers are Slavic. The German speakers are Germanic. And you Nordic people, but it doesn't matter. After all, Norway and Switzerland belong to the Germanic language family, while Bulgaria belongs to the Slavic language family. The general idea is correct, Chen Ong said as he waved his wand. Everyone present was divided into gray and blue. He nodded in satisfaction. That's how it should be. How can the Slavic gray animals mix together with the Germanic barbarians? Your civilization is different. There seemed to be students protesting, but Chen Ong did not hear them at all. Now, there are 2 drinks in front of you. Choose one and drink it all. Under Chen Ang's indifferent gaze, these careless students picked up one of the 2 drinks and sniffed it. Those reckless little rascals couldn't wait to finish it in one gulp. They had long smelled the aroma of alcohol that made their blood boil. Chen Ong even saw many Russian girls gulping down the 2 bottles without hesitation. As for those who weren't so reckless, after thinking for a while, they also chose to drink a cup. Those who choose vodka are Slavic, those who choose stout are Germanic, and those who drink both are Slavic. Once again, Chen Ong changed the color of their uniforms. The blue ones were the students who chose the Germanic option, and the gray ones were the students who chose the Slavic option. As he filtered through the choices one by one, based on the overall score, the pattern of the entire grade became clearer. Everyone was divided into 2 groups according to their temperament and nature. Only when the dividing line became clearer did Chen Ong stop, satisfied. He nodded and said, "That's more like it. What were you like when I first came in? Unable to distinguish between Mao and Da? Since ancient times, Mao and Da have never coexisted. You are not allowed to pair up. Mao Xiong and Hans will never be together. What is black magic in your eyes?" Chen Ong asked in a low voice. His voice was low, but it was loud enough to be heard clearly by everyone's ears. Is it power? Is it dominance? Is it glory? Is it hobbies? Is it ability? All of them, but not all of them. Black magic is the violent action of a person to carry out their will. It is everything that you have. It is undisguised violence, straightforward power, the simplest way to put your will into practice. I am not here to teach you how to wave your wand or answer your stupid and ignorant questions like how many syllables should be used to cast a spell. I am here to teach you how to carry out your will, how to place your will above everything else. You are here to learn from me how to control everything. You are here to learn from me how to be above everything, even death. Chapter 780. Many famous light magi and Merlin medal winners have stated that the casting of white magic and black magic requires a magus's inner emotions to be induced. That's right, I'm talking about Dumbledore. In the previous black magic class, your professor also told you that white magic, such as a bodyguard. Chen Ong flicked his wrist. An ray of silver light floated out from the tip of his wand. Soon, the silver light expanded rapidly, and a silver-clouded leopard landed on the ground along with a ball of silver light. It pounced on the 1st and 2nd years, passing through their bodies. Then, the guardian god opened its mouth, and Chen Ang's voice came from its mouth. It's a symbol that reflects one's inner heart. It requires one to focus and think about the happiest things in one's heart. It requires a magus to nurture a powerful positive emotion. That's why dark magi cannot use it. But you've all seen the results. I know that many magi who graduated from this school know this kind of high-level hex. In a way, they are the shame of Durmstrang. Due to the influence of traditional beliefs, magi who learn this kind of hex have many disadvantages when it comes to black magic. It's hard for them to maintain a strong destructive force. Chen Ong paused for a moment before continuing, but it's obvious that I'm vicious and merciless. I'm a true and outstanding dark sorcerer. That's why this is obviously a lie. Otherwise, those Oros in the Ministry of Magic, this is a British term, wouldn't be able to learn Guardian Hex while also being proficient in destructive black magic. From what I know, Dumbledore's unforgivable hex is very smooth. Chen Ong glanced at the students and found that they were listening attentively, but not as obsessed and focused as he wanted. It was obvious that the peaceful world of magic made these students uninterested in black magic. This was not what Chen Ong wanted. At this moment, Chen Ong suddenly understood why acolytes lived in such a harsh environment in Farron's wizard tower. In some evil wizard organizations, such as the Scattered Forest Tower and the Red Robe Wizard Organization, they were cruel and merciless. That was to let the acolytes know the value of power and the power of mages. No matter where it was, people would not treasure cheap things. However, when one's life was in danger, any life-saving straw was precious. Chunong felt that it was pathetic. He stopped explaining the knowledge of black magic to the students and used his cold eyes to wake them up. Then, he said coldly, "It seems that you don't know the value of knowledge. It's time to let you know the power of a school bully. A peaceful and comfortable dark magic school would never be able to nurture outstanding dark magi. I need the chain of disdain, the concept of hierarchy, and the laws of nature. I don't want to nurture a group of dark magi like Voldemort. They can only be that bad. What I need is evil, and I don't even need evil, but the pursuit of truth. I can also pursue eternity, but I definitely won't muddle through like this." Chunong made up his mind. He said indifferently, "I don't expect you to realize the value of knowledge and move your life's pursuit from money, power, and even social status, which are meaningless and vulgar goals. Instead, you should devote your life to the pursuit of truth. Because most people are destined to be despicable. They are the ones who are ruled. But you should at least realize that under your vulgar pursuit of power, status, and money, knowledge is still a step that must be taken. For the sake of it, you should at least respect it. I understand your current state very well. Lowly creatures succumb to the instinct of their own blood. After all, making people diligent is a kind of reverse flow that goes against human nature. No one is born to be diligent, but lazy muddling through is a behavior that we are born to do. Going against the nature imposed on human nature to pursue things that do not belong to us is, of course, painful. But pain is a journey that must be taken. In order to mold you into a real person, I have no choice but to take some necessary measures. Now look at the books on your left." As soon as Chunong finished speaking, a few stacked books appeared on everyone's left. Azathos and Other Horrors. Chunong read the name of the book on the top. There were other good books like The Nameless Sacrificial Book, The Truth of Magic, and Kanamago's Testament. I need you to come into contact with the real evil, not trash like Voldemort, but the real ancient things that can make you go crazy, and come into contact with the truth of the world. Of course, it is the truth that has been distorted. Only then will you realize what a terrifying world you are living in, and how dangerous the so-called magic in your body is. This process is what today's black magic lesson will teach. In the next lesson, I will teach you how to stay awake and counter these evils. The most important part of black magic is controlling black magic. In this way, you will no longer face the knowledge I teach you with such a vulgar and poor attitude, because you really need it. If someone is unfortunate enough to go crazy before the next lesson, it can only be said that they are unlucky. Anyway, it's just a little early. Now, open Azathoth and the Other Horrors. This is a collection of poems. It describes the Muggle poet Edward Pickman Derby's series of lyrics about his nightmares. The reason why I read this book first is because the evil hidden in it is relatively less terrifying. Evil? Someone sneered, because of the crazy words of a Muggle? Chunong did not seem to care. He did not need to be punished. When they read the poems, they would know that they were wrong. Wizards had chaotic magic, and they were even more sensitive than Muggles. Sometimes, it was not a good thing to be observant and sensitive, as it would cause one's mana to drop very quickly. Of course, coming into contact with these chaotic things that were homologous to their magic would indeed stimulate the development of their magic. Moreover, unlike Malfoy who read the Book of the Dead, they did not have a magic book left behind by the gods to protect their sanity. The older the wizard, the more powerful his magic was, and the easier it was for him to dream. They would dream of strange things, and some could even be said to be the truth of the world. Now that they had come into contact with Azathos and other horrors, Chun-Ong was sure that these young wizards would have a good dream, a dream of sweet happiness. Generally speaking, muggles would need about a week to go from reading to dreaming, but for wizards it might not even take a day. In the remaining time, Chun-Ong dissected some of the internal emotional mechanisms of black magic, and then led them to recite the clear poem Azathos and Other Horrors 3 times, as well as to Asena's and Dead but Not Dead, before the lesson was dismissed. Chapter 781. For the past few days, Harry had been secretly studying the Book of Golden Sun at night. He had already figured out some of the magic recorded in the book. Last time, when he chanted the first half of Arise, Praise the Sun, he had entered the spirit world. Harry guessed that the second half would allow him to go deeper into the final resting place of the soul. In Egypt, that was the underworld, but he did not know what it was in London. He discovered that he could influence and manipulate the spirits of the dead. He could enter the spirit world at any time and walk in another plane that the wizards could not see. The biggest benefit was that he no longer had to worry about being caught while roaming at night. But recently, Harry did not dare to roam at night and try to touch the magic book again. The commotion he made last time had made Hogwarts very nervous. The professors took turns to watch the night, and the students were also anxious. They exchanged information everywhere. Ron said confidently, "That must be an evil spirit. It lingers in the corridors and makes all kinds of strange noises every night." "No." Neville mustered his courage and said in a trembling voice, "That is a mummy. My granny knows a few Egyptian magician incantations, so this is how she chanted the hieroglyphics. I was scared when I heard the incantation that day. Only mummies can chant incantations like that." Harry did not participate in their discussion. He stood at the side, feeling a little guilty and awkward. Ron and Neville argued for a while, then turned to Harry and asked, "Harry, what do you think? Was it a mummy or a spirit that invaded the school that day?" "It was me," Harry replied in his heart. He felt a little guilty, but there was also a trace of hidden excitement. He could only say that he was a natural Gryffindor troublemaker. Harry opened his mouth and stammered, I think, it's a Death Eater." An annoying voice that Harry was familiar with came from behind. Harry turned around. It was indeed the annoying Malfoy. Harry had not seen him recently. He used to be the most showy guy in Slytherin, but he had been living in seclusion recently. This was the first time Harry saw Malfoy other than during class. Malfoy's face was pale, but it was not devoid of blood. Instead, it was a kind of profoundness, as if it was a bottomless well. Malfoy's impetuousness and arrogance of a pampered child had disappeared. He no longer looked at others with his nose in the air, and that impetuousness had turned into confidence. It was the kind of confidence that Hermione used to show, but he didn't have Hermione's scholarly confidence mixed with the Muggle's inferiority complex, which was the temperament of a Miss Know-it-all. It was old Malfoy, a mixture of aristocratic affectation and self-confidence in power and strength. This reminded Harry of what he had overheard Snape say the other night, that Malfoy was learning the cutting-edge dark magic. This made Harry feel even more disgusted with him. Fortunately, when Malfoy saw Harry, he had a very familiar sour look on his face. "Don't you know? The Death Eaters of Azkaban had broken out of prison. They are now moving around. The professors also suspect that the incident that night was caused by a Death Eater invading Hogwarts. I thought you already knew. Especially Weasley, isn't his father working in the Ministry of Magic? It seems that Mr. Weasley is not valued in the Ministry of Magic. A few of my father's powerful friends even wrote letters to inform him. But Mr. Weasley is in the Ministry of Magic, but no one is willing to tell him about this," Ron said angrily. "That's because your father is well informed among the Death Eaters. Who knows if he and those permanent paste." Malfoy shook his wrist, and the wand hidden in a secret pocket in his sleeve fell into his hand. He chanted the spell quickly and hastily, and before Harry could react, He had used the sticky spell to glue Ron's upper and lower lips together, sealing Ron's mouth. It happened so quickly that most people could not react in time. Harry shouted angrily and was about to rush forward, but Malfoy easily blocked him with layers of obstacles. Malfoy laughed coldly. It seems that Mr. Ron knows what he shouldn't do with his mouth. If he dares to speak carelessly again, his mouth and Mr. Weasley's position will be in trouble again. I remember that Mr. Weasley was just reinstated, because his stupid son drove a flying Muggle car and caused a huge ruckus. I hope he won't be suspended again because of that son of his rudely slandering a respected pureblood. The Weasley family depends on his salary. Malfoy glanced at Ron's old uniform and wand as he spoke. He turned around and left with a sneer. Ron's expression changed drastically, and he angrily howled at Malfoy's back. Malfoy suddenly turned back halfway and said, "The headmaster of Durmstrang has proposed an exchange program with Hogwarts, including a fellowship for the seniors and an exchange for the juniors. Dumbledore is considering it, but he won't be considering it for long. My father and the other school directors are happy to see it happen. Since Dumbledore became the headmaster, Hogwarts' achievements are obvious to all. But whether it's flattery or actual achievements, we need to compare it with other magic schools. Soon, you'll hear about the exchange program between the two schools. Durmstrang is a truly open magic school. I must say, their professors are much more open-minded than Dumbledore. Not just any nameless person can sneak into such an important exchange program. And I hope that some famous people won't leak anything during the exchange and bring shame to Hogwarts," Malfoy said loudly. Durmstrang is a school that focuses on dueling magic and magic duels. They are famous for their black magic teaching result. I dare say that no other magic school's students are more suited to this kind of competition than them. Malfoy loudly praised Durmstrang. Harry shouted at Malfoy, "So you can't do it either, right?" Malfoy did not fall for it. He only smiled sarcastically at Harry and turned to leave. Ron had already removed the sticky spell that sealed his mouth. He was about to go mad with anger. Although Gryffindor's classmates came to comfort him, most of them were deep in thought. The news of the Death Eater's prison break made them extremely uneasy, and many of them were trembling in fear. During the flying lesson, Madame Hooch explained the news to everyone. She consoled them. There's no evidence that the Death Eaters invaded Hogwarts yet. Professor Snape is investigating what happened that day. The Ministry of Magic has taken control of the situation and is pursuing the Death Eaters with all their might. They're like stray dogs, not daring to show themselves. Hogwarts has Headmaster Dumbledore and the professors. They're the people that the Death Eaters fear the most. Chapter 782. As expected, Dumbledore did not reject the exchange with Durmstrang. This was within Chun-Ang's expectations. The greatest light magus in history seemed to have no bottom line, but when things were still under his control, even the life and death of his most innocent student was not a decisive factor for him to consider. In the eyes of this great light magus, it seemed that anyone could be sacrificed for love. For the sake of his plan, he could sit back and watch as the pureblood family that had always supported him, as well as his loyal follower, the youngest daughter of the Weasley family, ran around Hogwarts with Voldemort's soul fragment, almost losing her soul. Similarly, when the snake monster was wreaking havoc in Hogwarts, this light wizard did not have the slightest intention of intervening. He still wanted to test the appointed savior. He did not arrange for the Dementors to enter Hogwarts for inspection, but the Ministry of Magic actually did it, letting a group of black robes come into contact with the weakest and most defenseless little magi. As expected, the daughter of a Ministry of Magic official would not enter Hogwarts to study. It was not unreasonable for Chun-Ong to suspect that the bunch of idiots in the Ministry of Magic were all supporters of the hidden Dementors. Of course, Chun-Ong was not a kind person. He read the Cthulhu mythos to the little magi during his dark magic classes, and it was said that it was worse than letting the Dementors come into contact with them. However, Chun-Ong never saw Magi as humans, and those Magi were Dumbledore's supporters, the foundation of the Ministry of Magic. Compared to them, Dumbledore and the Ministry of Magic were more ruthless. Chun-Ong felt that Dumbledore was probably very curious about the new Dark Devil. No matter what choice he made, collecting information about the new Dark Devil was the top priority. Durmstrang had obviously been infiltrated, so Dumbledore might put things on his home turf to better collect information and respond. That was why he guessed that Dumbledore might agree to the exchange between the two schools. Just like how Dumbledore agreed to the Triwizard Tournament, an ancient tournament where it was obvious that someone was up to no good. This tournament was very dangerous, and the reason it was stopped was because too many participants had died. This kind of competition was held in the same school, and the parents actually did not object, saying that Dumbledore obstructed it. This must be bullshit. Chun-Ong felt that the Magi still retained many of the customs of the Middle Ages, such as bloodline discrimination, black magic, and cruelty. Someone had indeed died. Cedric Diggory, a victim of Dumbledore's plan, one of the best students at Hogwarts, the pride of Hufflepuff, a boy full of wisdom, talent, and elegance. To be fair, if Harry Potter did not have the Messiah halo, he would have been at least 8 blocks below Cedric. If Dumbledore did not foresee that there was something fishy about the Goblet of Fire tournament, then he was stupid. If he had foreseen it but did not stop it, instead taking advantage of the situation and putting his students in danger by watching Cedric Diggory die, then he was vicious. If he only caused Cedric Diggory's death because of his negligence, then he was vicious and stupid. That's why I think Dumbledore has the potential to become the Black Devil. In Hogwarts, the first 2 people who have the potential to become the Black Devil are Dumbledore and Harry Potter. Their characteristics are different. Dumbledore is determined, Harry Potter is confused. Dumbledore is like Gellert Grindelwald, Harry Potter is like Tom Riddle. Dumbledore is calm, likes to control everything in his hands, and will sacrifice others to achieve his goals. Harry Potter is indecisive, hides the devil in his heart, and will sacrifice himself to achieve his goals. They are all potential candidates for the Black Wizards. Compared to them, Malfoy is still a child. Malfoy, who grew up spoiled by his parents, is proud, sharp, and mean. He has the hypocrisy of an aristocrat and the cruelty of a Death Eater, but in fact, the Malfoy family values family more than Dumbledore, who keeps saying that he wants wool socks. They can be cruel to strangers, but as long as they see their family as everything, they will never become the Black Devil. There is only one way for Malfoy to become the Black Devil. Force him to kill his family. Chun-Ong calmly analyzed. Now, I have put all the tools that can make Dumbledore and Harry Potter become the Black Devil into Hogwarts, but how they will develop depends on fate. People have things that they want to get back, but this kind of temptation is a fatal poison. Golden Sun Sutra, under your power of light, how much of the darkness of human nature is hidden? Now, there are 3 people around you who desperately want your power. Who will succeed in the end? Lifestone, Golden Sun Sutra is the bait for Harry Potter, Dumbledore, and Snape. Black Sutra of the Dead is the bait for Voldemort, Malfoy, and Old Malfoy. Love. How many sins have been committed in your name? Chun-Ong stood at the bow of the ship, which was anchored on a high mountain lake next to Durmstrang Castle. The students of Durmstrang had already boarded the ship, and were now standing behind Chun-Ong. They stood a distance away from Chun-Ong in fear. Many of the younger students had powerful magic, but because of their lack of control, they unconsciously released the magic in their bodies. Therefore, they attracted the fog. Black ghostly shadows danced in the fog, and a few thick tentacles climbed up the boat from the lake. Some distorted light and shadows walked around them, and there seemed to be vague, indistinct whispers in their ears. A witch's hair coiled around her head like a snake. The hair on her back shot out, wanting to strangle an 11-year-old boy wizard. The large strand of hair was like a strong arm, and the boy's tongue was pulled out. The tongue curled around the snake-like hair, and secreted a large amount of acid that dissolved the hair. The witch's long hair shrieked, and countless strands of hair stood up like snakes, staring at the boy. The boy's tongue suddenly opened, revealing a spiral of sharp teeth, like that of a lamprey. The atmosphere was very tense, and a fight to the death was about to begin. Chen-Ong, who was standing at the bow of the ship, suddenly turned around and looked at them. The two living organs quickly shrank back, as if they had seen a ghost, and obediently stuck to their master's body, just like ordinary hair and tongues. Chen-Ong nodded in satisfaction, pleased with the results of his teaching. Before he arrived, these black magic students could not even defeat a single red hat. After 5 hours, during yesterday's class, he had summoned 50 deep ones, and they were all killed by Germanic and Slavic academies. The students' progress was impressive, and the improvement made Chen-Ong very happy. He decided to lead his students to slay the snake monster when he arrived at Hogwarts. Chapter 783. Harry Potter stood in a line in the front hall of Hogwarts. The professors from each school were directing them to welcome the Durmstrang exchange students. Harry did not have a good impression of the school. Thanks to Malfoy, the school was firmly associated with dark magic in Harry's mind. "Don't tell me the students there are all like Malfoys," Harry whispered to Ron. Ron replied in a low voice, "It's a school that only accepts pure-blooded students. I can't imagine hundreds of Malfoys together. It must be a nightmare." Hermione was also eavesdropping on their conversation. Hearing that, she bumped into Ron hard. Ron stumbled and complained to her in a low voice, "What are you doing? I'm stopping you from saying anything worse." Hermione scolded. Durmstrang is one of the 3 major schools of magic in Europe. It has a notable reputation in the wizarding world, and is also a friendly school to our school. It is recorded in Durmstrang, the Hall of Duels. Although this school teaches dark magic, its students are mostly not prejudiced against muggles and mixed-blood wizards. They learn dark magic only because of tradition. Many Hogwarts seniors have formed sincere friendships with Durmstrang students. You can read about this in the library's Origins of the Triad. Ron grumbled discontentedly until someone next to him stopped him. "Stop it. Something is approaching. It should be the Durmstrang exchange students. Do you hear anything?" Harry listened carefully. A strange sound floated from the darkness, mixed with the sound of waves and inhalation. It was like bubbles passing through a whirlpool of water and sucking into the bottom of a lake. A faint, bone-chilling cold spread. Suddenly, fog rose from the surface of the black lake. It was thin at first, but in the blink of an eye, it filled the entire lake. The moonlight in the sky was blocked by the fog. As the fog spread, a faint, graceful singing came from the bottom of the lake. The senior students began to stir. Someone whispered, "Is this the singing of the Murlocs in the Black Lake?" Soon, a senior student retorted, "The Murlocs' singing cannot travel out of the water, and the language of the Murlocs is not the Murlocs." "Sirens? Sirens?" "The lake," cried Lee Jordan, pointing down at the lake. "Look at the lake." Harry could clearly see the surface of the lake from where he was. Although it was covered by fog, the fog was not so thick this time. Like the morning mist, he could still see more than half of the lake. At this time, the lake water had surged, and the smooth surface of the lake was rippling. A series of bubbles emerged from the center of the lake, followed by the sound of inhalation. The windless lake had set off a 3-foot wave, crashing against the shore. In the center of the lake, a huge whirlpool was forming. The whirlpool stirred the bottom of the lake, and Harry could see a frightened Murloc rising from the side of the whirlpool. The monster had sharp teeth, and its coral-like hair clung tightly to its face. It seemed to be struggling to get out of the whirlpool, reaching out its claws towards the Hogwarts students. But as if someone was pulling it down, it was dragged down and disappeared into the water. "Don't worry. Murlocs won't drown in the water." Pomona looked at the nervous faces of the students and comforted them with a smile. But Harry heard it. Ever since he entered the spirit world through the spell on the Golden Sun Sutra, he found that his senses had changed beyond that of a normal wizard. He could hear the sound of the water crashing against the wood under the waves of the lake. It was as if there was a ship hidden there. The boards and keel of the ship creaked, and then Harry heard the sound of bones breaking. In his mind, there seemed to be a mass of flesh with bones and scales torn between the keel and ribs of the ship. The tentacles of the giant squid in the black lake lashed out from the surface of the lake. He could see that it was extremely frightened, and it disappeared at the edge of the whirlpool as if it was running for its life. A few gradairos screamed. At this time, even the professors felt uneasy. Just as the Hogwarts students were in an uproar, the bow of a large ship broke out from the water like a great white shark peering at the surface of the sea. Then the rest of the ship rushed out of the lake like a flying boat, bringing with it a turbulent mist and violent waves. It was a black Spanish galleon. And just like that, it rushed into everyone's eyes. Cool! The Weasley twins were the first to react and shouted. Harry felt a slight pain from the scar on his forehead and even fear. The ship seemed to be dead. It sailed menacingly towards Hogwarts Castle, but there was not a single light on the ship in the dark. A blurry figure stood at the bow of the ship. He was thin and wore a black robe, and only a blurry shadow could be seen in the dark. The mist had dispersed, and the moonlight shone on the ship. It looked very strange, like a skeleton, like a ship that was being repaired. With the help of the moonlight, Harry could finally see the situation on the deck. The Durmstrang students who came for the exchange were standing quietly on the deck, just behind the shadow at the bow of the ship. They were silent, and under the moonlight they looked like dead people. Harry felt that the scene was very strange. The Durmstrang wizards on the deck. To be fair, they were like ghosts. After a while, they heard the splashing of the anchor and the creaking of the planks. It was a sound that Harry was familiar with. He saw the broken ghost ship open up, revealing the rotten keel of the ship. The keel and the ribs made a creaking sound, like a door axle without oil. Harry saw the bottom of the ship open up like a huge mouth, revealing a huge crack. The broken deck and keel were like jagged teeth. Harry took a step back in horror and stared at the dark maw. He wondered if this was the maw that had swallowed something, and the sound of flesh and bone rubbing against wood came back to his ears. Creak, creak. The people on the ship had disembarked. They were not as scary as Harry had imagined, like monsters. On the surface, they looked like a group of ordinary wizards. They were tall and generally similar to Harry's strongest classmates. Compared to them, Harry looked like a little chicken. The key was that the girls seemed to be the same. They were taller, but not as huge. Chapter 784. The young Oriental professor walked up the slope and greeted Dumbledore enthusiastically. Headmaster Dumbledore, I'm Durmstrang's new black magic professor. Dumbledore nodded and replied, Welcome, friends of Durmstrang. Hogwarts welcomes every friend who comes from afar. May the young wizards of Durmstrang gain friendship here. And knowledge. Chen Ong added with a smile. Dumbledore laughed. Yes, and knowledge. Chun. Dumbledore turned around and asked in a low voice, Can I call you that? I remember that you Asians often have your first name at the end, so I should call you Chen Ong? Chen Ong nodded. Dumbledore smiled and said, I know this secret from the pronunciation of your name. One of my students is a third-year witch from Ravenclaw. She should be like you are both Chinese. Chen Ong nodded slightly, but in his heart, he was thinking, has this old bee really targeted me? Is Professor Igor okay? Dumbledore asked. He asked someone to contact me about the exchange between our two schools, but he didn't show up himself. This time I thought he would come in person. Headmaster Igor is not very convenient, Chen Ong replied. You should know that there are rumors that Voldemort is back. The Death Eaters are moving around, and Professor Igor is very uneasy, so he reduced his movements. The Death Eaters hate him to the core, but London is the Death Eaters' headquarters. So, Headmaster Dumbledore, you definitely won't see him step into London. Dumbledore stopped and looked at Chen-Ang's calm expression, his eyes a little deep. He pondered for a while like an old man, as if he was recalling something. After a long time, he sighed and said, "Igor?" Professor Igor had a bad experience in the past, but he made the right choice later. He should have come here. Chen-Ang said faintly, "People always have to take responsibility for what they have done. No one can escape from this." Dumbledore invited the Demstrong students to live in the Hogwarts dormitory, but Chen-Ang politely refused. He transformed the boat they came from into a villa and brought the Demstrong students to live in it. Harry heard Professor McGonagall whispering to Dumbledore, "That's a very difficult transformation spell." She seemed to notice that Harry was listening and added, "The bigger the object, the more magic it takes. Few people can make a house in one breath, very few." Dumbledore laughed softly and said, "Professor Maliva is one of them. I can do it, but the difficulty of the spell has nothing to do with the amount of magic power consumed." Professor Mag was silent for a long time before he added, "Without the help of the magic text and potions, I won't be able to hold on for long." Before Harry could hear the rest of the conversation, Ron whispered, "I saw Wictel Crumb." "Who?" Harry asked. "Wictel Crumb, the new ball seeker for the Bulgarian national Quidditch team. People say he is the most talented ball seeker in the history of the Bulgarian team, the star of the future. Although he is not that famous now, he is widely praised." "Maybe I can get an autograph from him," Ron said. Ron sighed. "Their red robes are much more conspicuous than our black robes." When they went down for breakfast the next day, they found that the hall had been decorated overnight. Huge silk banners hung down from the wall, and on the left were the representative colors of Hogwarts: a red golden lion, a green silver snake, a blue golden eagle, and a yellow-black badger, all surrounding Hogwarts to form the destruction of Hogwarts. On the right was the emblem of the Byzantine Empire, which represented Slavic and Northern Europe, and even Germany. Its wings were spread out, and below it was the skull of a goat, which represented black magic. Together, they formed the emblem of Durmstrang. Harry and Ron saw the exchange students from Durmstrang at Gryffindor's table. They had taken off their heavy leather coats, revealing the blood-red robes underneath. They would greet Gryffindor's students warmly when they saw them, but somehow, Harry could not forget their pale and lifeless faces when he saw them on the ship. Chen-Ong and Dumbledore sat at the staff table. Chen-Ong had met most of the Hogwarts professors yesterday, but because it was at night, they only met briefly. Chen-Ong had to bring the students back. This time, sitting at the staff table with most of the Hogwarts professors, he could have more in-depth contact. The Lord God's mission was completed last night when he met Dumbledore. It seemed that the Lord God did not have any specific requirements on how to enter Hogwarts. Even if Chen-Ong was just an exchange professor from another school, he had reached the minimum requirement to complete the mission. On his left was Dumbledore, and on his right was the old bat, Snape. Although Chen-Ong wasn't too particular about it, but was it really appropriate for Dumbledore, this old bee, to arrange a bat that liked to spit venom and didn't care about his appearance beside a guest? Hermione noticed this problem. She lowered her head and whispered to Harry, "That Durmstrang professor seems a little uncomfortable sitting next to Professor Snape." Ron said gloatingly, "No one would want to sit next to that greasy old bat." Dumbledore seemed to have noticed the staff in the hands of the Durmstrang exchange students. It was as tall as Durmstrang's chest, and as thick as a duck's egg. It was actually a stick, and it had the luster of a log. This thing was not light, it was actually made of iron birch. This wood was used in the Muggle world to replace steel to make ball bearings. It was a good product from the cold Siberian highlands. Dumbledore even noticed that the males of Durmstrang had a thick layer of calluses between their thumbs and forefingers. Even the witches, under their youthful and beautiful appearance, had thick, muscular arms and legs. Especially their leader, Wickedor Crumb. The way he walked while holding a stick would make any Muggle who knew Eastern martial arts exclaim in admiration. He must have practiced the art of the stick to his bones. Dumbledore did not have any martial arts attainments, but he was no fool. Of course, he could see the ferocity of these Slavic barbarians. He asked in a low voice, "Professor Chen, I wonder what the Durmstrang students are holding in their hands?" Chen Ong smiled. "That's their new wands. Durmstrang is launching a reform campaign. We noticed that the wizards' reliance on wands may be abnormal. Most wizards now can't use any magic without the help of wands. You have to know that wands were originally just an auxiliary tool. We realized that this tool may be suppressing the wizard's potential for development. Especially when young wizards are growing up, the help of wands may cause dependence, leading to a decline in the wizard's ability to control and stabilize magic. This made us very worried. It is worth noting that only European wizards use wands. The Wagadu school of magic in Africa does not use wands. Instead, they use hand gestures to stabilize the magic power of their spells. This may be directly related to the amazing talent of the Wagadu school of magic in Transfiguration. According to our tracking research, the students of Wagadu are able to perform well in spells that require control and stability. The reason why this problem has not been discovered is that they do not use wands to cast spells. Therefore, when it comes to spells that require control, their performance is mediocre compared to ours who use wands. But when it comes to spells that cannot be performed with the help of wands, such as the self-transformation spell, Animagus, this can be clearly seen. The recent performance at the International Animagus Conference is proof of this. Those 14-year-old wizards and witches have frightened the adult magi in Europe. This is worth our attention. Dumbledore's face became serious. He whispered, "This is a valuable discovery. But the connection between wizards and wands is very complicated. Every wand and wizard is closely connected. First, there is mutual attraction, then mutual adaptation. In this process, the wand learns from the wizard, and the wizard also learns from the wand." "Yes." Chen Ong nodded and said, "Without the guidance of the wand, when the wizard grows, the turbulence of magic will not be eased. We have noticed that this process of communication between the wand and the wizard plays an important role in the growth of the wizard's magic power. So while we keep the traditional wand of the students, we are also looking for a replacement." Dumbledore's eyes were bright, and he asked curiously, "Have you found it?" Chen Ong nodded and said, "Found it, the same magic material that is suitable for communication with wizards, gems, various colored crystals and different gems. They also have the same complex personality as the wand, and are very suitable for mutual attraction with wizards. We use the most stubborn wood, iron birch, as the material for the wand. Its characteristics are well known for its stubbornness and stability. This can maintain the role of magic power dissipation in the wand and train the control of magic power in casting spells. Then inlay a gem at the head of the wand, replacing the ability of the wand and the wizard to learn and communicate with each other with the gem. Finally, use hand gestures to assist in casting spells. Those complex spells that require the help of the wand will be cast with a combination of hand gestures and wand. For this, we specially developed a set of one-handed hand gestures to accompany this kind of wand casting. Chapter 785. Chen Ong and Dumbledore exchanged their views on the way to stabilize magic. The two of them were probably the most knowledgeable people in the magic world. There were very few who could compare to them. Voldemort might be one, and if Nicolim wasn't dead, he would be another. Gellert Grindelwald, who was currently locked up in Numungard, could also be one. The rest, even the Hogwarts professors, couldn't join in their conversation. At the start, Snape, who was sitting next to Chen Ong, could still listen with a gloomy face. However, when Chen Ong and Dumbledore talked about the magic text and sound incantations in stabilizing the magic power of the wizard's bloodline, and the origins of the ancient magic text in the development of modern magic spells, his face became as ugly as a dead man's. Professor Mag, who was sitting further away, had a serious expression from the start. However, the disbelief in her eyes when she looked at Chen-Ong betrayed her. She was also shocked by the knowledge of this unknown Eastern professor, and even found it hard to accept. In fact, this was also the process of Chen-Ong and Dumbledore testing each other. It was only when the students from the 4 academies and Demstrong arrived at the dining table that Dumbledore stopped and smiled. "Ladies, gentlemen, ghosts and guests of Demstrong, good morning. Students from the 2nd and 3rd years, today's classes will be temporarily suspended. We will be starting an exchange activity with the guests of Demstrong. In the next month, Professor Chen-Ong will be opening a new course for all of you. It's in the style of Demstrong, dual course. Now, let us welcome Professor Chen-Ong." Harry looked at Chen-Ong in shock. Ron, who was sitting next to him, was also stunned by this news. He exclaimed, "That's amazing!" The whole of Hogwarts was in an uproar. Harry heard the seniors of Gryffindor whispering to each other, "How is this possible? Is the principal crazy? Why would Dumbledore agree to such a ridiculous thing?" Only Malfoy laughed proudly. There were even cheers from Slytherin's seat. Harry asked Ron, puzzled, "What happened? Why is everyone reacting like this?" Ron could not hide his surprise, but there was also a hint of nervousness and excitement on his face. He replied, "Demstrong's specialty is black magic. Dual class is, in fact, a black magic dual class. This means that we will be learning true black magic with great destructive power." Harry did not react, but Hermione, who was next to him, almost jumped up. She shouted, "How can Headmaster Dumbledore allow such a ridiculous thing? Teaching dark magic is illegal." "This is..." Ron hesitated. "It is illegal to teach the unforgivable curse, but most black magic has no restrictions. Otherwise, Demstrong would not have been able to operate it legally for so long. In fact, teaching unforgivable curses is illegal, but allowing students to study by themselves and read magic books is legal." Hermione shouted angrily at him, "I will report this to the Ministry of Magic. If they still have a bit of rationality, they will stop Headmaster Dumbledore's crazy actions." At this moment, cheers and applause came from Slytherin's seat. The exchange students from Demstrong also jumped up and cheered. However, the other 3 academies were whispering to each other, producing a buzzing sound like a swarm of bees. Chen-Ong stood up. Facing such a scene, he did not feel awkward at all. Instead, he announced, "Here, everyone can learn methods to carry out their will and knowledge that is closer to the truth. Many people think that I will teach you some dark and terrifying knowledge, but in fact, I think it is more important to teach you how to find light in the darkness, and how to control your ambitions and desires. In fact, black magic is not scary. Uncontrolled black magic is scary. I know that many of you want to become Aurors and become clerks in the Ministry of Magic. Then you must properly grasp this opportunity. This is the only chance for you to receive black magic education 5 years in advance. Although it's only for a month, the students of Hogwarts will have lessons with the students of Durmstrang. You will receive real training from me and learn the greatest and most basic skills of a wizard. It's like using magic to carry out your own will. You will learn how wizards resolve conflicts when they are irreconcilable. That is a choice between life and death." At this moment, Gidro Lockhart impatiently jumped out. He said loudly, "When Professor Dumbledore asked me for my opinion, I said that I completely agree with Demstrong's suggestion. You have all studied under a top-notch master of black magic. As long as you can learn a bit of my ability, black magic will not be able to withstand a single blow from you. Just like the countless times I have fought against evil creatures and black wizards. You can read the details in my book. Next, I will demonstrate the rules and etiquette of a duel with Professor Chen-Ong. He told me that this will be helpful for your future studies and understanding of black magic defense. So, under his request, I will show you how to defend against top black magic. I do not want the guests of Demstrong to worry, so when my spell hits your professor, do not scream." Ron whispered to Harry, "I don't think Demstrong's black magic professor is worse than a Cornish elf. I hope that when our professor looks at him, he will not scream like a little girl." Not far away, a Demstrong exchange student whispered to the side, "May Azathos watch over him. Other than that, I really cannot think of how he can defend against our professor's black magic." Harry also heard a Demstrong exchange student ask, "Will the professor kill him? That is the best ending he can imagine." Someone replied with a sneer. Hermione heard it too. She turned to Harry and said, "How can they say that about Professor Lockhart? That is so rude." Harry felt in his heart that the Durmstrang exchange students were right, but he could not say anything in front of Hermione. At this time, the senior students had finished eating and were ready to go to class. Harry and the rest were asked to stay in the hall. He saw Chen Ong wave his wand, and the long dining table in the middle of the hall disappeared. In its place was a shining golden stage against the wall. The magical dome above their heads was clear, and the sun was just right. Chapter 786. Chen Ong and Lockhart faced each other and bowed. Lockhart explained, "This is the dual etiquette of the magic world. As you can see, we will raise our wands in front of our chests and count to 3 before casting a spell on each other. Of course, children, don't be nervous, I won't harm your professor." "Thank you for your explanation, Professor Lockhart." Chen Ong nodded. "I thought this was my job." As soon as he said this, the exchange students from Durmstrang laughed loudly without any malice. Harry and the others also laughed, but it was hard to say whether these boys had any malicious intent towards Lockhart. A formal duel between wizards has a strict etiquette procedure. Before the duel starts, both sides have to raise their wands in front of them to show respect, or bow to each other. Afterwards, both sides will walk to opposite ends of the field and begin the duel. In a regular duel, both sides have to use a certain amount of magic to attack each other until one side loses his wand and loses the ability to retaliate. However, in the magic world, there is a tradition that has never been mentioned by law, nor has it been approved or acknowledged. When the conflict between you and a wizard reaches an irreconcilable degree, you can reach a duel that ends in death. Of course, I have to emphasize that this duel is completely illegal. However, if both sides are purebloods and fight to the death for the sake of their family's honor, all witnesses will maintain a tacit understanding. The loser will not appeal to the magic world, and the victor will also maintain his silence. This is because this is the honor of purebloods. The students from Slytherin and Durmstrang cheered loudly. Malfoy was even more excited as he shouted, "The honor of purebloods!" While the other 3 academies maintained their silence, the exchange students from Slytherin and Durmstrang enthusiastically cheered. Although Slytherin didn't have any strict requirements, almost all of the students in this academy were purebloods, or were purebloods like Voldemort. As for Durmstrang students, they had to be purebloods. The professors of Hogwarts were silent. This sensitive topic obviously made them very uncomfortable. Here, I will demonstrate an ancient contract spell, Dual Oath. Chen Ong slightly shook his wand, and a silver ray of light shot out from the tip of his wand towards the space between the 2 dueling people. A dual vow is a type of magic contract, or rather, a spell of secrecy. Magic contracts are one of the more important parts of ancient magic spells. They have been diluted in modern magic, but they have not disappeared. Instead, they form the elements of magic spells and form the foundation of modern magic. Most of the contracts in magic spells play a very important role. The flying incantation contains the concept of property right. If an item has a property right contract with someone else, then if you can't get the owner's approval, the flying incantation won't work. This is also why the flying incantation can only fly over items that belong to you. Of course, if your level of magic incantation is high enough, You can use the power of the contract between you and the owner to establish a temporary property, right contract with the item, when the owner approves you and summon the target item. This is an example of the widespread use of contract magic in modern magic. Another spell with more obvious characteristics of contract magic is the famous incantation. It is a good helper for wizards to keep secrets, the incantation of loyalty. The dual oath that I will cast now is an ancient spell. It was widely used in the Middle Ages. At that time, the world of magic had not yet formed a complete and reliable law and law enforcement system. Wizards loved to duel, because duels were an important way for them to resolve conflicts and problems. It was a dark and bloody era. The story of the three brothers in the poetry Urn and Pea stories reflected this. The one who had the old wand was invincible in duels, which attracted the jealousy of the dark wizards. In the end, he died in a despicable murder. In that era, pure-blooded families had not yet formed. Everything was chaotic and lawless. When wizards dueled, there was no judge or witness. There were even many wizards who despicably broke their vows during duels, causing a lot of chaos. In that era, when oath magic was still developing, someone created this spell, Dual Oath. Through the power of magic, it prevents the duelist from breaking the rules of duel and performing evil deeds like sneak attacks. Now, Professor Lockhart, please demonstrate. Chen Ong raised his wand and gestured to Lockhart. Lockhart was stuck between a rock and a hard place. He could only tentatively release a magic signature on the silver light above their head. The silver light floating above their heads exploded and transformed into a pair of crossed silver wands under the dome of the auditorium, signaling that the dual contract was successfully established. 1, 2, 3. Both of them waved their wands at the same time, but just as Lockhart uttered a vowel sound from his throat, he was struck by a green ray and petrified on the spot. Chen Ong retracted his wand, as if he wasn't the one who got rid of Lockhart with a flick of his wand. The expressions of the Hogwarts professors changed. Chen Ong didn't even make a sound. He only made a simple gesture and released a rather strong black magic. Seeing that Professor Mag's mouth was agape as if he was going to protest, Chen Ong explained, "Professor Lockhart was only hit by the petrification ray. I've weakened the power of this magic, so Professor Lockhart will recover on his own in less than half an hour. So, you don't have to worry about him." He pointed at Hermione, who had already jumped up. Hermione was so agitated that her cheeks were red. She kept protesting, how could he do that? Ron rolled his eyes at the side and mumbled, "This is a duel, and Lockhart is useless." The result was already expected. Harry, who was at the side, kept nodding. The guys from Slytherin and Gryffindor had a rare rapport, and they all burst into laughter. Lockhart had only been here for 2 to 3 weeks, and all the guys in Hogwarts were already annoyed by him. That was considered a skill. However, there were many fangirls among the girls here. They were still resentful when they saw Lockhart being defeated so easily by Chen Ong. Chen Ong ignored the laughter and grumbling below. As the organizer and researcher of a large-scale teaching and witches' bloodline research experiment, he really didn't care what these test subjects were thinking. Chen Ong calmly said, "Who knows why Professor Lockhart couldn't resist at all just now?" Chen Ong didn't stand on ceremony with Lockhart, and directly said, "And what's the most important factor in a magic duel?" A Demstrong exchange student stood up and answered, "It's speed." "Well said. Demstrong, 5 points. Chen Ong said with a smile. "If we participate in the school cup too." "Why not?" Dumbledore laughed. He stood up and waved his wand, and a new point representing the school rose from the hourglass of the Hogwarts school cup. Without a doubt, that was Demstrong's point. Dumbledore said with a smile, "Hogwarts welcomes all who come here to learn knowledge with a broad heart. We are not afraid of any competition, and we welcome every friend." Chen Ong nodded and continued, "That's right, the most important factor in a magic duel is speed. When the countdown stops, Whoever is the first to cast a spell will have half a foot in his hand. Why half a foot? Can anyone answer that? Another exchange student from Durmstrand stood up. Counter magic. Professor. Magic counter. Chen Ong repeated. Without waiting for him to say anything, Dumbledore raised his hand and laughed. 10 points for Demstrong. In a magic duel, a defensive spell will produce a defensive effect against an offensive spell. In other words, an offensive spell will only be effective if the offensive spell breaks through the defense of the defensive spell. However, the magic defense of a defensive spell is not universal. For example, Armor Curse is more effective against blunt weapons, sharp weapons, Disarm Curse, and Physical Poltergeist Curse. However, against Fire Curse, Soul Reaver Curse, and Life Reaper Curse, the effect will be much weaker, and it is extremely easy to break through. However, it is more effective against Fire Curse than Armor Curse. But what if two dueling wizards cast an attack spell on each other at the same time? What effect will it produce? Without waiting for anyone to answer, Chen Ong explained himself. It will produce magic counter, which means that before your opponent's offensive spell is broken, your spell will not be able to take effect. Both parties will fall into a battle of magic and willpower, until one party overwhelms the other. The reason for the magic counter might be due to the exclusivity of magic power. In a force field, one magic power cannot bypass another magic power to exert its effect. Therefore, in a magic duel, when speed is not the primary factor, the second decisive factor, the strength of the spell is largely dependent on the strength of the wizard's magic power and also has a considerable relationship with the strength of the wizard's willpower. Just now, I defeated Professor Harlot with speed. Who can say why Professor Harlot was already hit by my spell when he was still chanting? This time, even Durmstrong's students couldn't answer, because Chen Ong hadn't taught them yet. Seeing the silence, Snape coldly glanced at the Hogwarts students and said in an icy tone, Professor Chen Ong, I'm afraid these little idiots won't be able to understand the subtleties of your magic. How much more can you expect from them? Chen Ong smiled. They just haven't learned it yet. Spell delay. Chen Ong said, this is the supreme magic skill related to speed in this trick. It allows you to hold a spell in place and maintain it in a state that is about to be activated. As for how long the spell can be maintained, it depends on your magic, technique, and the strength of the spell. Before the duel started, I had already completed the Petrification Ray spell, so when Professor Harlot was still chanting, my spell had already hit him. The students of Durmstrang and Slytherin stood up and applauded. Hermione was furious. If not for Ron holding her back, she would have stood up and started spouting nonsense. Chen Ong motioned for everyone to calm down and continued, as for the second trick, how did I prepare a black magic spell under the eyes of you and Professor Harlot? That's a supreme magic skill related to stealth. Silent spell. Brilliant wizards can discard their wands and cast spells without using incantations. Another trick is that you can use hand gestures instead of wands to assist in casting spells. Because of the proliferation of wands, many wizards have already lost their vigilance against enemies who aren't wand-wielding enemies. You can secretly complete a spell under their eyes when you are disarmed and lose your wand, just like what I did just now. This time, the cheers were even more enthusiastic. This time, students from other academies started to cheer for Chen Ong. There were Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, and even Gryffindor. Ron even saw his twin brothers applauding for Chen Ong. I came to Hogwarts because of the school's request that I not teach black magic. But if you ask me what you can learn here, then I will say, there are many. Dueling is a subject, an art that a wizard must master. It is a knowledge that can be studied for a lifetime. It is strength, wisdom, courage, and perseverance. Everyone can find what they want to learn here. Dueling is a wizard's most basic ability. It is the ultimate standard to test a wizard's magic. If you fail the general or ultimate wizard examination, you will only lose your future. But if you are unlucky to fail a wizard duel, you may lose everything. The true difference between an outstanding wizard and a mediocre wizard is their extraordinary dueling ability. This is my advice to you. In my class, I will not teach you how to cast spells or how to pronounce the incantations. I will only bring you to truly understand magic and enter the world of magic. Learning the knowledge that you have never heard from other professors and supreme magical techniques is only one of them. It is only the beginning. Next, I will ask you, are you ready? Are you ready to enter that magical world with me? I am ready. Malfoy stood up and said excitedly, Professor, in Hogwarts, I have seen the true meaning of magic from you for the first time. This is more shocking than anything I have ever learned. Hearing his words, the Hogwarts professors' faces turned ugly. Even Snape looked like a dead man. Of course, he was always like that. The Slytherin students were a little excited. They were not favored by Dumbledore. Although it was not obvious on the surface, after the arrival of the Savior, this feeling was somewhat obvious. The Ravenclaw students were also a little noisy. They had the best grades and respected knowledge. Chin Eng's knowledge had convinced some of the higher grades. At least, most of the Ravenclaw students would attend his class seriously. Chapter 787. Chen Ong was busy teaching, and the poor Lockhart was still frozen there. His popularity in Hogwarts was extremely bad. After so long, not a single professor went to see him. In the end, Professor Mag had to take into consideration the student's authority as a professor, so he walked up to Lockhart, pulled out his magic wand, and cast a spell-stop spell on him. However, it didn't have any effect. Lockhart was still frozen on the spot as if he was dead. Chin Ong walked over and said, Professor, it's useless to do that. The petrification caused by the petrification ray isn't the state, but the result. A spell like spell-stop that dispels the status of the curse can't remove it, just like it can't remove the damage caused by the shadowless divine blade or the burns caused by the fire curse. The inspiration for the petrification curse came from the snake monster's gaze, so the removal of the curse is also related to that. The potion made from the mandrake grass can cure the stiffness caused by the petrification ray. But you have to take note that the permanent petrification ray will cause the lung muscles to stiffen. Usually, the person will die from respiratory failure within 2 minutes. It's a very dangerous curse. Chen Ong explained softly. At the same time, his hands didn't stop moving. He cast a counterspell to wake Lockhart up slowly. At the same time, his left hand completed a hidden gesture. This was a modification spell that could make one forget everything, a golden millet dream. Its effect was to blur the memory of the person who was cast the spell, resulting in a blurry memory after waking up from the dream. Lockhart would have a vague memory of this period of time, but the part that Chen Ong didn't want him to remember would be as blurry as a dream. Professor Lockhart gave us a very good demonstration. Chen Ong helped Lockhart up. When he was still in a daze, he patted his shoulder and loudly said, Professor Lockhart isn't a small wizard like you. It's very easy for him to stop me. He was only cooperating with me just now to demonstrate to everyone what we have to pay attention to in a magic duel. Lockhart was hit by a powerful black magic, and was still suffering from some side effects. He was clearly a little dazed, but he had an almost instinctive conditioned reflex when it came to protecting his own reputation. Yes, a demonstration is a good idea. When Professor Chen Ong told me to cooperate with him to complete the demonstration for this duel class, I took the initiative to suggest that I show you the complete duel procedure, including defeat. It would be easy for me to win, but it would put too much pressure on Professor Chen Ong. I mean, the person you should be familiar with is him. That's why I made such a request. I don't want to steal his limelight. Lockhart gradually came to his senses, and his logic became clearer. His other abilities might be a mess, but his eloquence wasn't bad. Looking at the expressions of his fangirls, Harlot's performance had deceived more than half of his admirers and followers. Of course, Harry and the others wouldn't believe him, but it seemed like Hermione did. This showed that IQ and idolatry didn't have much to do with each other. Any woman could become a brainless fan. They weren't fans because they were brainless, but because they were fans because they were brainless. Of course, there were some who were fans and brainless, but these types of people could be said to be the shame of humanity. Every time one of them appeared, it would make people's eyes light up, and they would be tempted to give them a Darwin Award. Most of Lockhart's glorious experiences in his book were obtained through deception, but there were two things that were real. One was his exquisite writing style, and the other was his incantation that was impossible to defend against. At this moment, Lockhart was using his silver tongue to brag about the story of his duel with a wizard in the snowy mountains of Tibet. In the end, Chen-Ong had no choice but to interrupt him. If he were to continue, this duel class would become a report on Lockhart's glorious deeds. He cleared his throat and said in a low voice, "Professor Lockhart, it's getting late." Although Lockhart's memories from earlier were blurry, his fear of Chen-Ong, or rather, his lingering fear was still there. Seeing this, he hurriedly interrupted himself and said, "All right. Now I'll split you into groups of 2. Professor Chen, please make the decision." Lockhart put a skinny Durmstrang student and Ron together. Harry was anxious to death, because he kept seeing the Durmstrang student grinning, revealing 2 canine fangs like a viper. His tongue was so long that it almost touched the bridge of his nose. At a certain moment when it brushed past Harry's eyes, Harry inadvertently saw that the Durmstrang student's pupils had become vertical like those of a feline or a cold-blooded animal. His cold pupils were filled with cruelty and coldness, sending chills down one's spine. However, it was only a phenomenon that he observed for a moment. When he focused his attention and looked carefully, the student smiled at him, and his appearance had returned to normal. What happened in that moment seemed like an illusion, but Harry swore that he saw it clearly. "Yakov," Chen-Ong called out to the Durmstrang student, "why don't you go up and demonstrate for us?" Yakov agreed with a smile, and dragged the iron birch wand that was taller than him up the stage. Ron was also a little excited, but also a little hesitant as he looked at the Hogwarts professors on the stage. He saw Snape's familiar cold gaze, and Dumbledore's warm smile as he looked at him encouragingly. Ron was just about to take a step forward when he was hugged by Lockhart. "Great. You're Harry's friend, right? Don't be afraid, with my guidance, the youngest defense against dark magic professor in Hogwarts, you'll be invincible. Listen well. Do as I usually teach you." "What do you usually teach us?" Ron was in despair. "You didn't teach us anything. You can't even deal with the little elves from Cornshire." He really wanted to shout these words out, but seeing Snape's viper-like expression, he tactfully shut his mouth. In reality, Snape, who loathed Lockhart, wouldn't necessarily care about this. However, it would depend on whether Snape loathed Lockhart more or the trio more. The biggest possibility was that Snape would humiliate Lockhart and punish Ron harshly. Ron lifted his old wand, and stood on the stage as if he was walking on thin ice. The two bowed to each other, and then walked back to the duel position. After Lockhart shouted 3, 2, 1, Yakov roared and rushed up with his wand. Lockhart paled at the side, and Ron was so scared that he didn't know what to do. Hence, Lockhart warned loudly, "Disarm incantation is only allowed. Stop there and chant the incantation." Yakov raised his spear like a dragon, and swung his wand at Ron's face. Only then did Ron start to chant the incantation, and thus, before he could finish chanting, he was hit heavily on the cheek. His head tilted to the side, and he fainted. Lockhart rushed up in a hurry. He walked up to the duel stage, and raised his wand to disarm Yakov. But he made a mistake. He walked too close. Yakov raised his wand. It was made of iron birch wood, and was as thick as an egg. The body of the wand was both hard and flexible. While retaining the hardness of iron birch wood that was comparable to steel, it also had the unique flexibility of wood, and its ability to channel magic was also very strong. Yakov's magic flowed smoothly in the wand. This handy wand had already established a trace of connection with Yakov when he was resisting the invasion of the evil god's consciousness. Yakov seemed to have gone mad. His eyes were bloodshot, and he fell into a state of madness. But with the help of the wand in his hand, he managed to maintain a trace of clarity. Such a state of madness on the outside and calmness on the inside coincided with a profound martial art that Chun-Ong had imparted to him. Hence, the magic wand carried a strong gust of wind as it slashed towards Lockhart's face. Lockhart's face was smashed by the wand. He covered his mouth in pain, trying to protect his big teeth. But after being hit on the face, he couldn't use the incantation anymore, and Yakov wouldn't let go of this opportunity. He used his right hand to lift Lockhart's lower body, and his left hand responded with a punch, beating Lockhart until he fainted. It was as if he had used the forgetting incantation, forgetting everything, physics. Chapter 788. Oh my God! Professor Mag raised his magic wand to stop Yakov, but Yakov was as brave as a dragon. He grabbed a Gryffindor boy at the side. It happened to be Harry's roommate, Dean Thomas. This poor dark-skinned boy was lifted up by the thin and weak Yakov, who used him to block Professor Mag's disarming spell. He held Dean in front of him like he was holding a shield, and rushed towards Professor Mag. The Hogwarts students screamed and ran in all directions, but the Durmstrang Exchange students only laughed on the spot. They gloated and said, "Yakov is going crazy again. Don't tell me he dreamt of Sata Higra again yesterday. Poor Yakov, he has been getting more and more haggard recently. I'm afraid he will be selected by the professor for training." Training? I'm afraid he won't live until then. Yakov, if you continue to fool around like this, you might get special guidance. Someone shouted at Yakov, but he had obviously fallen into a trance, so he didn't hear anything. He threw Dean at Professor Mag. That not-so-small body was thrown up high like a rag sack by Yakov's frail body and smashed at Professor Mag. Snape shot a disarming spell at him, but it was deftly deflected by Yakov. Professor Mag couldn't use powerful magic, and had to split his attention to protect Dean, so Yakov had already rushed in front of him. He swung his magic wand around like Gandalf. With a roar, the spiritual and magic contamination from the evil god of chaos made him carry an evil aura. A roar could intimidate people's spirit, and it was equivalent to a halo of fear. It had to do a willpower check on the people around him. Although Professor Mag was experienced and knowledgeable as a professor, he was bound by his students' limitations. Furthermore, he was caught off guard, and was struck by the battle roar at close range. As a result, he was slightly slower in his waving of his magic wand, and that slight delay almost caused him to fail miserably. The reason why he said he almost failed was because Chun-Ong finally came to the rescue. Yakov froze on the spot. His iron birch magic wand, that was as thick as an egg, was only a needle's length away from Professor Mag's head. Professor Mag had even closed his eyes, and the disarming spell in his hand was only a millimeter away from being activated. It looked like a scene of mutual destruction, but Chun-Ong knew that if he didn't stop Yakov, Yakov would at most have a headache, and Professor Mag would probably lose his memory. His thick nerves, which had been tested by the evil god for a long time, couldn't be destroyed by a disarming spell. Furthermore, Yakov had the enhancement of Berserk now, so his spirit resistance was already at an insane level. Chun-Ong kept his wand. Yakov, who had been hit by the Petrify spell, was already stiff. This time, it wasn't a spell that was weakened by hand gestures. If Chun-Ong didn't dispel the spell, Yakov would have to stand there for a long time for the effect of the spell to dissipate naturally. Professor Mag opened his eyes, trembling. When he saw Yakov's battle-crazed expression, he almost released the disarming spell that he had prepared earlier. He froze there, glaring like a diamond, but his small body was bursting with powerful energy. Because he was hit by the petrify spell while moving. Yakov's body was like a drawn bow, full of strength and tension. Chen Ang's expression was solemn, and the Hogwarts professor's expressions weren't good either. This time, Hogwarts had lost a lot of face. In a wizard's duel, one of their professors was knocked down by a Durmstrang student, and they almost lost a second one. Of course, they didn't have to be so conflicted. They had Voldemort as a scapegoat. Last time, his terrorist attack was ended by a baby, and then, in the future, he fell again in a duel with a Hogwarts student. This time, he gave it his all. And these two were the same person. Voldemort was the most humiliating one. Because of this, his underlings had no choice but to brag about the myth of a Messiah. Because if there wasn't a Messiah halo, then their boss would have a nemesis that smelled like milk. Snape once again looked at Lockhart, who was lying on the ground, with disgust. This person was a disgrace to Hogwarts. After Professor Mag woke up, he said in a trembling voice, "I've never seen such a ridiculous scene. A student publicly attacked a professor in front of the professors, and twice," Snape said impatiently, "but he almost did it. That's what's ridiculous, isn't it?" Snape, who had a typical dark wizard's personality, obviously didn't think this was something to write home about. To him, Professor Mag had almost been successfully attacked by a junior student. Although she had her reasons for holding back, this was obviously not the student's humiliation, but Professor Mag's humiliation. She should hide in her dormitory and reflect on herself. And Professor Mag obviously had the personality of a traditional pious old lady teacher, old-fashioned, concerned about etiquette and tradition, and strict with her students. She would show mercy to her students, like how she did when she faced Yakov's attack, but she would also tremble with anger at this kind of behavior. To Snape, no matter if it was a student or a professor, the most important thing to them was a wizard. Wizards were great because of magic and power, and to Professor Mag, no matter how powerful her students were, the most important thing between them was the teacher-student relationship. A student dared to attack a professor. This was simply lawless. Professor Mag glared at Snape angrily, and turned to Chen Ong. "Professor Chen Ong, what happened this time? I cannot tolerate it. You have to deal with this student who attacked the professor." Chen Ong explained. "Yakov's mental state is unstable. His magic is growing too fast, and it's pressuring his brain. It's my fault this time. I shouldn't have ignored his mental state and allowed him to participate in the duel. We can't push the responsibility to a student with mental problems. For this incident, Demstrand will deduct 50 points." He turned to the exchange students and said, "We are a group, we should take responsibility together." The exchange students from Demstrand stood behind Chen Ong silently. They seemed to be using their silence to express their attitude, which shocked the Hogwarts students at the side. Harry thought silently, although the exchange students from Demstrand look very arrogant, their unity is worth learning from. The truth was actually in the minds of the Demstrand students. These people thought silently, what are these points for? It doesn't seem to be very important, when the professor says that we should remain silent. Otherwise, he will make us shut up forever. Yakov, my good brother, we're safe with you this time. I hope you can survive the professor's training with a clear mind. What we can do is to buy time for you and preserve your memory before the professor comes looking for you. Otherwise, your memory will be messed up and you won't recognize anyone after you go crazy." Professor Mag was also convinced by Chen Ong, but she was still very dissatisfied with Chen Ong. She questioned, "Professor Chen Ong, although I have no right to comment on your teaching method, you are obviously too lenient with your students. I remember Professor Lockhart repeatedly emphasized that we can only use the disarming curse." Chen Ong sighed. "Professor Mag, you're making things too difficult for me. Wizards never restrain themselves in a duel, and the students of Demstrand have always received proper duel training. It is really too difficult for them to suddenly obey Professor Lockhart's words. Professor Mag's voice faltered because she didn't have high hopes for Professor Lockhart either. How unreliable would it be for the students to obey this professor's orders? She could only keep a straight face as she said, "Don't tell me that the wizards' duels in Demstrand are as barbaric and impulsive as the Muggles?" He was carrying a rod. Yes, that was a rod and not a magic staff. When he came up with the rod, I thought we were back in the Middle Ages again, when the Vatican's knights dragged their spiked hammers around to kill the wizard. No, no, no. Qianong explained, Professor Mag, he was casting the amnesia curse. This is the modification I made to the amnesia curse in Demstrand. I modified the amnesia curse, which is very difficult and has a high requirement on magic power and spellcasting technique, into a wandless spell. Later on, I realized that this kind of spell actually only requires a heavy blow to the head, and a large amount of wand movements and magic power can be omitted. You only need to touch the head with the wand, and use the technique and magic of a mischievous spell to achieve the same effect as the amnesia curse that requires exquisite spellcasting. Furthermore, you can use techniques to replace the requirement of magic power. This is an exquisite spell that makes use of magic power's inherent characteristics. The trick is to hit hard. The heavier the hit, the simpler the magic power required. Chapter 789. After the professors brought Lockhart to Madame Pomfrey, the students of Hogwarts and the exchange students from Durmstrang dispersed noisily, and this farce finally ended. Professor Mag felt exhausted from the bottom of her heart. She looked at the empty seats in the auditorium and sighed. Headmaster Dumbledore, you have made a wrong decision. Dumbledore smiled. Nothing is absolutely wrong, Maliva. There are only suitable and unsuitable. It's only the first day. Professor Mag sighed. It's only the first day and a professor is already injured. Although I don't like Professor Lockhart, he's too frivolous, but this kind of treatment is too much for him. How is Professor Lockhart? His memory went back to 3 years ago, Dumbledore said calmly. Speaking of which, when Madame Pomfrey was treating him, she found something interesting. His memory for the past 3 years was very messy. When Madame Pomfrey was retrieving his memory, she only saw countless messy, indescribable bad memories. It was like the memory of a crazy monster that was stirred up by a forgetting spell. Madame Pomfrey said that just reading these memory fragments was going to drive her crazy. But when Madame Pomfrey was reading Lockhart's memory from 3 years ago, she accidentally discovered something. Maliva, although I don't want to believe it, I'm afraid Professor Lockhart will have to receive treatment in Azkaban. Azkaban has already been occupied by the Dark Warlocks, Professor Mag answered instinctively. Then, his expression changed and he asked, What happened? Professor Lockhart is suspected of using a forgetting spell to steal other people's experiences. We have already found a victim. He was attacked by Professor Lockhart after he told Professor Lockhart about his journey with vampires. There might be many more victims like him. The adventures that Professor Lockhart wrote about in his best-selling book might have all been stolen from others. Oh my God! Professor Mag was in disbelief. Dumbledore whispered, In order to protect the school's reputation, we will announce that Professor Lockhart has lost a portion of his memory due to a teaching accident and needs to receive treatment at St. Mungo's. The defense against black magic class will be temporarily handed over to Professor Qianong, who came for the exchange from Durmstrang. What? Professor Mag's eyes widened as she screamed. You want a dark warlock to teach a defense against black magic class? It's better to let Snape take over. I know he's been eyeing that position for a long time. This is what Professor Snape suggested, Dumbledore said in a low voice. Professor Mag was in disbelief. She grabbed the hem of Dumbledore's robe and asked in horror, Is he crazy? Headmaster, Snape is mad. Are you mad too? How much trouble did that professor cause in class today? Sometimes, if you don't give people a chance, you will never be able to see them clearly. Dumbledore smiled. If you don't let Professor Chen try, how will you know if he is suitable or not? Chen Ong returned to the dormitory with Demstrong's students. Yakov had already recovered from his madness. After hearing what had happened from his classmates, his little face was pale with fright. When he saw Chen Ong walk up to him, he trembled and stammered, Professor, I didn't do it on purpose. I dreamed of the old gods last night. They controlled everything I did. There are no old gods, Yakov, Chen Ong said, shaking his head. Only me. Although the existences in the poems that I made you memorize still exist, they are far away from this world. The chaos in this world, although still as chaotic, is not as indescribably terrifying. Those poems and magic books cannot communicate with those great old ones. They only described the nature of magic chaos, and made your mind more sensitive. Sensitive enough to touch the well of eternity. What you see is my reflection in the well of eternity, a distorted shadow because of the huge arcane energy and chaotic magic. Yakov was even more terrified. If Chen Ong had been a terrifying black devil in their hearts before, he was now an omniscient and omnipotent evil god. Looking at the little wizards who were trembling like quails, the little girl's hair that was tangled together and tied into a dead knot, Yakov's tongue that was trembling and hitting against his teeth, and the 6 eyes of a tall wizard who was crying tears of blood behind his neck, Wickedor Crumb's lower jaw was full of octopus-like tentacles. The tentacles twitched as if they were convulsing, stretching towards Chen Ang's back. Chen Ong could not help but sigh. It's all right, Yakov, he said calmly. You did well. All of you must be wondering what the nature of magic and power you gained from touching the old gods in your dreams is. In the first few lessons, I mainly talked about how to control and protect one's own spirit. Some people learned this well and managed to maintain their human form. Some people didn't learn it well, or they rashly came into contact with the old gods, causing their bodies to mutate. All of you feel stronger and stronger day by day, and your magic grows at an exponential rate. I know that most of you are afraid of this, and think that the power of the old gods and monsters has infected you. But today, I'm going to tell you about the origin of the black magic you learn. According to research, most wizards' magic comes from their own bloodline. Wizards have magical bloodlines that are of the same origin as magical animals, which nourishes your magic, so your magic will gradually grow as you grow older. Secondly, some magic items that are closely related to wizards will also interact with each other because of their connection with wizards. When your magic power stimulates the growth of the magic items, it will also grow due to the reverse effect. All powerful magic items, such as the old wand, can also make a wizard's magic power stronger. But at the end of the day, wizards still use the power within their bodies. The magic power nourished by your bloodline. Your magic power originates from your physical strength, life force, and vitality. Wizards use magic spells to move the power of the entire world outside their bodies. This is the magic power and spell system. But I'm not satisfied with this. I hope to find the huge system that wizards use to pry open, and in turn, stimulate wizards, transform you, and obtain power that is far stronger than relying on bloodline growth. This is the origin of my black magic system. I found a new plane, a world beyond our world. There is an endless amount of power there. The whole process is a secret, but in the end, I absorbed this power into our world and opened up a well that connects our world to that world. That is the well of eternity, the source of darkness, the source of arcane magic, and the energy core of the universe. The controller of the well of eternity is an existence known as Morgoth. He discovered this world and radiated his power to this world. The power of the well of eternity that I discovered is a kind of pure energy known as arcane energy, while the power that Morgoth radiated to this world is a kind of chaotic magic with its own characteristics, which is full of darkness and chaos. Morgoth distorted my shadow, so that anyone who pursues arcane power will be infected with chaotic magic in their dreams. The Well of Eternity is a powerful source of radiation, with a powerful energy comparable to a star that can destroy the world. Every second, the energy absorbed from the Well of Eternity can destroy this planet more than 10 times. Therefore, when your magic is exposed to its radiation, it will grow thousands of times faster. If you have enough willpower to control this power, and enough wisdom to control this power, you will be omnipotent. If you have the determination, you can use Morgotha's power to explore the secrets of the Well of Eternity. Find a way to influence, control, and use this magnificent power. As your mentor, I have already guided you to the foot of this path. The rest of the path is up to you. Looking at the dumbfounded exchange students of Durmstrang, Chen Ong turned around and returned to his room, leaving behind a group of trembling wizards, shocked by his words. How long will it take for this setting to reach Dumbledore's ears? How long will Dumbledore consider before seeking death to sense the power of the Well of Eternity? Chen Ong pondered, should I give Harry some hints, lest he finds it difficult to compete with Dumbledore for the title of the next Dark Devil? Or give Malfoy a chance? Chapter 790. Chen Ong stared at the sky. There, in the void where the wizards and muggles could not see, countless blue arcane energies converged into a huge energy vortex. From the surface of the earth, it occupied half of the sky. This energy vortex, called the Well of Eternity, was about half the diameter of the earth. It orbited the earth in an orbit further away from the moon. It radiated powerful arcane energies to the entire solar system. Of course, about 99% of the energy was compressed in the center of the vortex, and only 1% of the energy was radiated in the form of inertia. This inert arcane energy had some of the characteristics of dark energy. Unless it was activated by specific mental waves, it would not react with the visible matter and energy of the earth. The main body of Morgotha's will that Chen Ong summoned from the Siluan world entered here. In the plane connected to the Well of Eternity, a low-latitude plane that had no concept of time, it took advantage of the huge time gap between that plane and the universe to absorb the endless fluctuating energy in the vacuum of the universe under the Planck time scale. Chen Ong closed his eyes, and his will went to outer space. He looked at the Well of Eternity, which was 50 million kilometers away, and about a quarter of the size of the Earth. The energy vortex was like a huge blue wheel, spinning counterclockwise. The wheel was carved with countless three-dimensional runes, and it was a well made of pure powerful arcane energy. As Chen Eng's will was activated, the energy flowing in the mouth of the well, which was as vast as a star, gradually came to life. The entire Well of Eternity seemed to have awakened from its slumber. The blue runes lit up one by one, and in the blink of an eye, the wheel the size of a planet was lit up. Tens of millions of kilometers away, the Johnson Space Center of NASA in Houston, United States, suddenly became restless a few minutes later. The director of NASA, Terry Franz, who was woken up by his subordinates, hurried to the conference room. He said angrily, "What happened? Why did you call me here in the middle of the night?" A scientist from NASA's Ames Research Center explained, "Just now, NASA's Ames Research Center, Dryden Flight Research Center, Glenn Research Center, Goddard Institute for Space Studies, Goddard Space Flight Center, Independent Certification and Appraisal Institute, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Kennedy Space Center, and 13 other research centers, including NASA's Ames Research Center, Dryden Flight Research Center, Glenn Research Center, Goddard Space Flight Center, Independent Certification and Appraisal Institute, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and Kennedy Space Center, all of which are affiliated with NASA. This may be the most shocking discovery since the perfection of quantum mechanics." Hearing the names of famous research institutions in the field of aerospace, astronomy, and outer space research, all of the conference participants couldn't help but straighten their back. The director of NASA couldn't help but forget about his unhappiness just now and looked at the scientist with a serious expression. According to the data from the cesium atomic clocks, hydrogen masers, and rubidium atomic clocks in the major aerospace research institutes and satellites, our world has lost 30,892 seconds of time. Lost 1 second? The director's face was solemn. What happened? Did you find out the reason? The reason is unknown. The scientist was sweating profusely as he said with difficulty, "Today, there are hundreds of atomic clocks distributed in more than 50 countries in the world. They constantly send their measured time to the International Bureau of Weights and Measures, BIPM, in France. This is the International Atomic Time System. Just now, the various space agencies first reported the abnormality of the atomic clock. After later comparison with the International Bureau of Weights and Measures, we finally confirmed that just 2 hours, 13 minutes, and 52 seconds ago, our Earth time has accelerated by 30,892 seconds." Looking at the bewildered federal officials, the scientist had to make a simple scientific explanation. As we all know, atomic clocks use the electromagnetic waves emitted when atoms absorb or release energy to keep time. This kind of electromagnetic wave is very stable, and the accuracy can reach the level of error of 1 second every 20 million years. But just now, the atomic clock's time was abnormally disordered. According to the comparison of the disordered data of the atomic clocks in various places, they seem to collectively have an error of about 1 second. Also, according to the order and time of the disordered satellite and atomic clocks in various places, we can confirm that the source of the accident is about 50 million kilometers away from Earth in outer space. What's the reason? The director slammed the table and asked. If I have to report to the president, I have to at least tell him what the reason is. I can't wake the president up with a phone call and tell him that we know nothing. There are many possibilities. The scientist was sweating profusely as he explained, space-time and gravitational field have a very close relationship. It could be an abnormal fluctuation in the gravitational field of the solar system, such as the sudden interference of a massive celestial body. It could also be a sudden energy tide erupting from the sun. It could even be that someone has traveled through time. What are the possibilities? The director asked solemnly. I don't know. Maybe it's infinitely close to zero? The scientist wiped the sweat off his forehead. Then give me the biggest possibility, the director roared. If there's the biggest possibility. The scientist looked up at the director with despair in his eyes and whispered, then it's probably that there are aliens passing by not far from Earth, and the curvature engine has caused fluctuations in the nearby gravitational field, causing space-time disorder. Aliens? The director's face was as ugly as death. I'm going to report to the president. Gather more information immediately and summon the Star Wars program office. But the Star Wars program has been disbanded. Then start it again. At the same time, the British and American Ministry of Magic were already in chaos. The huge clock in the American Congress of Magic was already pointing to red, which was the exposed level, meaning that the world of magic was about to be exposed to the Muggles. There was also a clock in the British Ministry of Magic's Hall of Mysteries, and the hour hand on it was pointing to major threat. The Minister of Magic, Foggy, was already in a mess. He roared loudly, "Are you sure it's not Azkaban's problem? Is it the dark wizards up there doing something again?" "Minister, there's no movement from the dark wizards of Azkaban. Those former Death Eaters are still cautiously contacting their families. Get Dumbledore here, find the witch prophecy, and go to the Hall of Prophecy to see which crystal ball is glowing," Foggy said in a trembling voice. At this time, someone shouted, "Found it, found it! It's the Hall of Time!" Foggy hurriedly turned around. He hurried to the Hall of Time with his men, only to see that the hummingbird that was constantly reincarnating had frozen in the air. Among the countless clocks, some of the endless ticking sounds had become chaotic. Foggy looked at a stagnant clock. The hands on it had stopped at 3 hours, 52 minutes and 5 seconds ago, which was exactly 2 hours, 13 minutes and 52 seconds before the Houston Space Agency meeting. Oh my God! It's time! A wizard's mouth was wide open in horror. Investigate! Foggy roared. Investigate the time converter in the Ministry of Magic. Find out if anyone has violated the law of time and changed what happened in the past. Investigate the lost second. At this moment, someone shouted, "Dumbledore is here!" The crowd parted like a tide, revealing a tall figure with a long white beard. It was Dumbledore himself. Foggy went up to him as if he had seen his savior. His tone was flustered, as if a disaster was imminent. "Dumbledore, we're doomed. The time of this world is chaotic, and we're all in danger. Don't worry, speak slowly." Dumbledore's calmness calmed the restless hearts. He looked at Foggy with gentle but firm eyes and asked, "Tell me, what happened?" All of this was seen by Chen-Ong, who was controlling the Well of Eternity, but it was like a meteor streaking across the sky, leaving no trace. His will was supporting the Well of Eternity, which was half the diameter of Earth. The moment its energy was activated, the powerful energy distorted the gravitational field and created this chaos, but it had now stabilized. Those idiots in the world of magic might not be able to observe the Well of Eternity in the void even if they studied it for 1,000 years. Moreover, this energy construction technology is beyond their imagination. The technology one used to build the Well of Eternity is still too incredible for them, and it doesn't conform to the settings I just revealed. A black wizard can't create such a thing in any case. It's better to degrade a fake Well of Eternity. Chen-Ong controlled the arcane energy that gushed out of the Well of Eternity and shot it towards the moon. The rings in the void lit up layer by layer, and endless powerful arcane energy converged into a ray, shooting it from the center of the Well of Eternity to the moon. The powerful arcane energy began to reshape the moon according to Chen-Ang's will. In the future, the moon will be a focus of the Well of Eternity's radiation energy. Inert arcane energy will be activated by the moon and then radiated to Earth, making the wizards on Earth think that the moon is where the Well of Eternity is. This place shall be called the Well of Eternity. In the future, when the Well of Eternity is further developed, it can even transform the sun. By then, the Well of the Sun will also exist. Arcane energy is activated arcane energy, pure and powerful, full of pure destructive power and power. Then, should Morgatha's chaos magic be replaced with evil energy or chaos magic? I'm afraid those wizards won't be able to withstand the true chaos magic, and the world will be destroyed. As for the great old ones, the ancient evil gods? Then it'll be the real ancient evil gods. Chen-Ong smiled and stuffed the clone of Azathos that he had caught in the void into the moon, as well as the collective consciousness aberrations, entropy beasts, and psionic polluters that he had created during his experiments in the past. If I say it's an ancient evil god, then there must be an ancient evil god. I'm such an honest boy who never goes back on my words. There's indeed only Morgatha's consciousness in the Well of Eternity, but I didn't say that there wouldn't be an ancient evil god in the Well of Eternity. As for the fact that the moon is a Well of Eternity transformed by the Well of Eternity's radiation, and not the real Well of Eternity, that's a hidden worldview. Ah. Chapter 791. Filch was in his small office, a place that most students were unwilling to enter. The room was very dark, with only a single oil lamp hanging from the ceiling providing a meager amount of light. The room was windowless, and it constantly smelled of fried fish. In this respect, Filch had already mastered the essence of the dark cuisine of the British Empire. Large wooden cabinets stood against the gray, scratched walls, where the files of disobedient pupils had been kept. Against the cabinets was a fur-covered chaise long covered with cat hair, and in a conspicuous place behind the desk hung a pair of heavy shackles. Everyone in the school knew that Filch had often begged Dumbledore to let him hang his pupils from the ceiling. Of course, unless Dumbledore was crazy, he would never agree. Filch also liked to threaten to lock students up in the dungeons in the basement of Hogwarts. He kept a 9-headed whip. This whipping instrument was a favorite of the Muggle Catholic monks for self-abuse. It was also used in some missionary schools to discipline students, flogging and corporal punishment. Malfoy glanced around in disgust. "Stinks of cat," he said gruffly. "Clean it up." He did not use his wand. He just pressed his fingers slightly, and a strong suction force sucked the air out of the room and replaced it with fresh air. Gall and Crabbe were still behind him, but after a period of training from Malfoy, they were much more obedient, and had a little more awareness of being lackeys. "Let us wait here for Filch to come," Malfoy sneered. He pulled out a letter from his pocket and said to the 2 lackeys, "Gall, well done. If you hadn't discovered this, I wouldn't have known about Filch's secret." He lowered his head and read the words on the envelope: "Rapid Conjuring Correspondence Course for Beginner Magicians." Malfoy raised the letter in his hand and announced loudly to his lackeys, "Our gatekeeper, Argus Filch, is actually a lowly, disgusting squib. A squib even lower than the mud. No wonder I've never seen him use magic." Malfoy laughed heartily. Gall and Crabbe also laughed. Crabbe replied to Malfoy fawningly, "A squib? In our family, if we gave birth to a squib, it would be a disgrace to the entire family. My father would definitely get rid of him. Even the wizards who followed Dumbledore would banish the squib from their family. But Dumbledore actually dared to keep a squib in the school. If I tell my father about this, he will definitely kick both Filch and Dumbledore out of the school. He is a trustee of Hogwarts, he has the power to do so," Malfoy replied reflexively, but he quickly snapped out of his childlike cruel and boastful state of mind. He subconsciously tightened his grip on the black leather-bound magic tome in his arms and whispered to his 2 followers, "When Filch returns, you 2 guard the door." Gall and Crabbe thought of the knowledge he had learned from the book: how to control subordinates, how to hold power, how to control great, exquisite magical power. He reflected on his immaturity just now, and became solemn. Gall and Crabbe saw that Malfoy had become silent and solemn, and they both shrunk their heads and hid behind Malfoy. For some reason, they were most afraid of Malfoy in this state. Malfoy did not have to wait long before the door opened, and Filch walked in with a triumphant smile on his face. "Harry Potter is in trouble this time," Filch said excitedly to Madame Norris. "I've finally caught his tail." Although Mischievous did not say it, he is now so afraid of Harry Potter, which can only mean that the one who caused trouble that night was indeed him. His eyes turned to the inside of the room and saw Malfoy and the other 2. Filch sprang to his feet like an old cat. "Malfoy," he cried, "now is not the time for you to walk around. Looks like I'll have to teach you a lesson." Filch stopped talking and his pale face turned brick red. His mouth, which had been dutifully and caustically just a moment ago, was wide open like a dead fish. The vitality that had been mixed with harshness and jealousy in Filch's body seemed to have been sucked out of him in an instant, and he became a little dazed. He hobbled over to Malfoy and the other 2, and tried to snatch the letter away. But Malfoy put it away with lightning speed. He gave Gall and Crabbe a look, and Crabbe hurriedly pulled the reluctant Gall to the door to hold the letter. Spell of disruption. Malfoy closed the door to Filch's office, and also used the spell on them. He did not trust Gall and Crabbe. After using the spell, even if they leaned on the door to eavesdrop, they would not hear anything. Filch. Malfoy remembered some of the things he had learned from the book, and decided to try them on Filch today. He sat in Filch's chair, and crossed his hands on his knees like a big boss. He whispered to Filch, "Dumbledore kept the secret well. Who would have thought that the gatekeeper of Hogwarts, a part of its glory, would actually have a squib in an inconspicuous corner of this glorious, great school?" No. Filch stammered. Filch stammered, "This isn't mine. It's for a friend. It might look like, but I can see through people like you at a glance. This is the skill of our Malfoy family. Every Malfoy family member can see through those lowly mudbloods full of lies and squibs," Malfoy sneered. "Look at your eyes. Don't you see the ugly expression of jealousy and greed when you look at those noble purebloods, even if they are lowly mudbloods? Argus Filch, I don't know which pure-blooded family you are the disgrace of, but you must have been kicked out of the house by your family. Because of your family's leniency or negligence, you have been allowed to live in such a disgrace. The reason you hate those wizards who have made mistakes is because when you look at them, your heart is filled with jealousy and resentment, like a poisonous snake gnawing at you. Those youthful auras, happy laughter and magic, all reflect your ugly heart like a mirror. That's why you are so jealous and resentful. You enjoy the feeling of torturing them. You are born to be a traitor. We all know why you prepared the shackles and whips in your house, and we all know how you look forward to sending the children of Magi to the dungeon. I swear, if I tell my father about this, he, who is very concerned about the growth of young Magi, will gather the school board and let those noble pure-blooded Magi chase you out of this school." "I never thought of it like that," Filch said fearfully. "Master Malfoy, I never dared to think of it like that. If I were such a person, Dumbledore would definitely chase me out." "It doesn't matter what Dumbledore thinks," Malfoy scolded. "What matters is what my father and I think. You should know the legend. If the Dark Lord knew that you, a squib, dared to be in the place where he once studied, the Death Eaters would kill you. Just like Dumbledore's demonstration. They won't do anything to the students, because their children are inside. They won't do anything to the mudbloods, because it will drive their parents crazy. But what about you? Filch, who cares about a squib?" "Dumbledore will protect me," Filch said incoherently. "He can't take care of himself. Besides, Filch, squib is an original sin, a dirty and lowly thing. It is a disgrace to wizards, a disgrace to the family. I know, Filch. No one wants to be a squib. Look at Neville, he almost became a squib. This is all thanks to his uncle, who forced out Neville's little potential. From now on, Neville's future will be completely different. No wizard will be willing to marry a squib, but Neville, a wizard, can study in Hogwarts," Malfoy said mockingly. "So you are still praying for these deceptive lies." He tore Filch's letter apart, and Filch was so excited that he wanted to snatch it back. "Strangle hand!" Malfoy roared angrily, and Filch immediately felt an invisible hand choking his throat. The hand was shockingly strong, like a giant monster, and Filch was lifted into the air. He could only helplessly struggle against the invisible hand, his pale face flushed red, and his legs kicked weakly in the air. "Do you understand the difference between us? I am a wizard, a powerful, noble, pure-blooded wizard, while you are just a squib that is not even comparable to mud. You should be glad that you are living in this chaotic era. If you were still living in the glorious era of purebloods, you would have drowned at the age of 11. Filch looked at the cold Malfoy in despair, but he felt the hand on his throat loosen, and he fell to the ground. "But you are lucky. I am not an ordinary wizard. Even among the purebloods, I am more glorious. I have the power that the wizards of the past could not even dream of. My power can topple everything. As a squib, you have a new choice. Live on as a wizard, and not die like a piece of trash in the coming reckoning." Malfoy laughed. "I can let you regain your magic." Although magic is rooted in noble bloodlines, the mud species proved that one does not need noble bloodlines to become a pure-blooded to grasp some of the secrets of magic. This is the purebloods bestowing their power to their servants, allowing muggles to have magic. But unlike the purebloods, the magic of the mud species originates from magical creatures, from domestic elves, and from the bloodlines of magical animals. I know this secret, and I have mastered the magic to bestow magic to muggles again, the bloodline modification magic. It can inject those stinky, lowly blood into your veins, so that you and your descendants will have lowly magic. But you must remember that the magic of the purebloods is noble, while the magic of the mud species originates from beasts and is lowly by nature. People nowadays are confused about this. In the future, I will make them remember it again,